Chapter 998. In his heart, Duke warmly cursed Nozdorm's 18 generations of ancestors and sincerely offered the essence of 5,000 years of Chinese civilization to this bastard level 10086 dragon of time. All the words in his mind had been used by Duque more than 10 times. He could totally imagine Ronan, Krasus, Vanessa, and Brock singing and playing in the forest of Azeroth, then happily bumping into the demigod Cenarius and playing the game together. Why can these 4 guys choose the difficulty of the game? I'm playing Hell mode right from the start? I, Duque, am the first to be dissatisfied. Alright, that's all. It's useless now. Nozdorm had sent Duque to the Burning Legion's nest, the Twisting Nether, and made Duque be surrounded by hundreds of millions of demons. The only way for Duque to survive was to find a way to enter the Earth Matrix and successfully teleport to Azeroth. For example, to gain Killed Jaden's favor and become a part of Killed Jaden's sinister plan. This caused Duque to pinch his nose and eat even though he knew that there was a bowl of hot *tea in front of him. He elegantly sat on the operating chair that was starting to change to fit Duque's body size. Duque gave Grom a look. Trust me. Grom's heart jumped as he looked at Duque, and his mouth was filled with bitterness. Born in that primitive and barbaric world full of courage and heroism, Grom had always been proud of being a great orc. Orcs were the bravest race. Orcs were the greatest and most advanced race. From birth until he drank the demon's blood, Grom had always firmly believed in it. Until he saw other more brilliant civilizations, such as the Draenei, humans, dwarves, elves. When the orcs won, he never admitted that other civilizations were superior and more advanced than the orcs. But the cruel battle of Blackrock Mountain changed everything. In the face of the overwhelming artillery shells, the last of the orcs' elites were burned to the ground. The free and powerful orcs were reduced to slaves of the humans for as long as 12 years. When they regained their freedom while the Scourge army was wreaking havoc, they once again saw the violent artillery and mechanical civilization. Even the most arrogant orcs had to admit that in the field of civilization, the orcs had fallen far behind the other races. Under the leadership of Duque, the combat power of the Alliance was far beyond that of the tribe. Grom didn't dare to imagine what would have happened if the Scourge and Burning Legion hadn't been pressured by the Alliance. However, when he was teleported by Nozdormu to the Burning Legion's space battleship from 10,000 years ago, he finally realized a shameful fact. The Beast Men had completely fallen behind. Not to mention the advanced technology of the Burning Legion, even compared to the Alliance of 15 years after the Dark Portal, the Horde was simply primitive. After 13 years of guerrilla warfare in Tirisful Forest, Grom fully understood what it meant to be beaten if one lagged behind. He had asked himself countless times why he didn't die bravely, instead living in hell, oppressed by the humans and even the entire Alliance. Eventually, he came to a conclusion. In hell, there was a meaning to surviving. Because only by surviving could the race reproduce. Only then would there be hope for the future. That was why living and fighting were meaningful. Grom survived the continuous deaths of his companions. He didn't rely on miraculous survival, but instead, he carved out a bloody path with his axe. The sacrifice of his comrade had long since made Grom forget what tears were. Even though he would wake up in the middle of the night from the violent and bloodthirsty nightmares caused by the demonic blood, he couldn't deny that his actions were wrong. No matter how much pain he felt, no matter how he felt about this terrifying bloodline curse, only by fighting could he save his people and lead them to the path of the future. This bloody path was destined to be full of thorns. Perhaps he didn't know when he would be the only one left wandering at the gates of hell. He was glad that Thrall, the young and great chief who had helped the tribe rise again, had finally appeared. There were many times when he wanted to throw away the heavy responsibility on his shoulders and pass away peacefully with the beautiful expectations he had for the Beast Men. Looking at Orgrimmar rising from the ground, Grom only had one last wish left in his heart, to repay a favor from a human. Although that human was once the tribe's public enemy, he was also the greatest person. His greatness even transcended the boundaries of race and country. With the thought of repaying his debt, he had agreed to come to this dam 10,000 years ago and fight for a historical correction mission that seemed to have nothing to do with the Beast Men. But now, he suddenly realized that he had a new responsibility on his shoulders. He had a responsibility. He had to tell Thrall about the terror of the Burning Legion that he had seen with his own eyes. He had to tell the entire tribe. In order to achieve this goal, he had no choice but to personally witness his benefactor, right in front of him, shouldering another disaster for him. Grom's strong arms struggled, and his mouth twitched. His sharp fangs clattered, not because of fear, but because of excitement. Yes, he owed Duque another life. Even though he had seen with his own eyes how Duque had forcefully converted Archimonde's evil curse power into holy light, it did not erase the guilt in his heart. Grom knew very well what would happen once such a high-purity evil power entered his body. But Duke smiled and plucked away the despair that should have belonged to his Grom. He did not say a word, just a proud look. It was as if Duque was saying, "You want to corrupt me? Even 100 times more won't be enough." Duque lay down with a smile, and then made countless plans in his mind. In the deepest part of his heart, he built layer after layer of mental defenses. Come on! Best actor Duque had a fanatical expression on his face, as if he was willing to sacrifice his body for the Burning Legion. That was the desire for power. That was the worship of the strong. The Eridar twins, who could not read Duque's mind at first, finally looked satisfied. That's right, this was the expression that a bunch of useless followers should have. The huge and terrifying needle pierced directly into Duque's heart, and the high purity of evil power that would make a large number of Apocalypse Guards jealous was injected into Duque's heart drop by drop. Even the gentle Duque could not suppress the violent reaction in his body, and let out a bestial roar. Nozdormu, I will castrate you when I get back. Chapter 999. Warning! Warning! The host's body is experiencing a strong depravity reaction. Please activate Light-Darkness Attribute Conversion as soon as possible. Otherwise, the upper limit of the host's moral integrity is likely to be permanently reduced. In Duque's spiritual sea, the system genie's alarms were ringing incessantly. The alarms were so loud that it almost drove Duque crazy, but Duque could only choose to turn them off. He had no choice. This was the Burning Legion's lair. Not to mention the sinister and vengeful Kill Jaden was commanding the fleet at the moment. Even Sargeras, who had been killed by Duque, and Archimonde, who had just fallen on Mount Hyjal, were still alive and kicking in the Burning Legion's space fleet at this point in time. Turning darkness into light? What a joke! Did he not see how Kill Jaden and Archimonde had hunted down Willan and the Dreenii for countless centuries in revenge for the betrayal of Willan, one of the 3 leaders of Eridar? If Duque dared to show even the slightest bit of transformation, he would immediately be sent to the dissection table. Warning! Warning! As the host's moral integrity, humanity, is about to break through the lower limit, one or more of the negative spiritual characteristics that were once suppressed will randomly appear. Seeing this, Duque immediately cursed in his spiritual sea. Bastard! Why did I make so many protective walls in the spiritual world? Sorry, host. Your spirit and soul still exist based on your body. The condition of the body will in turn affect the spirit. You can't expect to have your best spirit when your stomach is hungry. Duque was silent. In the silence, with some fear in his heart, he watched as more green dark energy entered his heart. Duque was unlucky. Because he was sold to this damn place, even if he repeatedly vowed to teach Nozdorm a lesson, even if he swore 1,000,000 times that he would kill every last member of the Burning Legion, he could not change the fact that he was now unlucky. Duque was lucky. The essence of dark energy was the dark power that destroyed life and soul. It was the greatest collection of all negative states. This was because Duque had subconsciously isolated his 5 senses from his mind and body, so that he could not feel the endless burnt stench of death impacting his sense of smell. There was no need to know the torturous torture of the body when the evil energy was injected into the body, or how horrifying the pain it brought to the sense of touch. He would also not suffer a double blow to his hearing and soul because of the despair and anguished wails of the countless races and living beings who were destroyed before they died. They wouldn't even see the tragic visions of those unlucky souls before they died. What Duque had to face was the various psychological impulses brought about by the high-purity dark energy. However, this was not going to be easy. In the virtual illusion, Duque had already begun to fight against all kinds of negative impulses. He created a fake version of himself eating 10,000 Big Macs to counter gluttony. He dealt with the greed in his heart by robbing the American Express 1,000,000 times. He slept in the illusory world for 10 million years to complete his sloth. He fought an endless war with the teacher in the 10 terabytes porn to resolve his she-ran desire. In the end, he beat up the Burning Legion's big 3 10,000 times, and then turned them into ashes 100 million times to vent his wrath. In the outside world, Grom watched anxiously as Duque's body convulsed in the dark energy solution. He could not imagine what Xueqi had to face in the spiritual world. But as he listened to Xueqi's bones and saw Xueqi's body expand to the size of two people, it was not hard to imagine how much pain Xueqi was suffering at the moment. However, on the other hand, he could also see some clues from the horrified expressions of the Burning Legion's demons. Crazy! Crazy! This is crazy! Did we get the purity wrong? How can a lowly creature contain so much dark energy? Aura's face was full of disbelief. This is impossible. Do you think we are all blind? That is enough to create 100 demon lords. Queen Saloras gritted her teeth. Could it be that this mysterious human is especially good at containing dark energy? Are you kidding me? There can't be such an existence. But the amount of dark energy he absorbs is far beyond the level of a normal lord. It's almost at the level of a commander. Aura's looked like she was about to cry. The Erida Gemini could not imagine what it would be like to have a fourth big three in the Burning Legion. At that moment, the syringe that was being pressed in suddenly stopped. The Erida Gemini saw this and finally stopped the horror in their hearts. After all, this meant that Xueqi's total dark energy was at most half of a commander-level demon. In fact, it was not even half. Because the next second, Xueqi's eyes suddenly opened. Without any warning, all the pores on his body opened at the same time, spewing out turbid dark energy gas mixed with green and black. At that moment, the surging green gas turned into a huge shockwave and first sent all the middle-level demons closest to Xueqi flying. Then suddenly, the Apocalypse guards howled in pain as they knelt on the ground. It was not that Xueqi directly attacked them, but they were all burned by the ultra-high-density dark energy gas that Xueqi spewed out. Air could be used as an air cannon to kill enemies when it was 10 times or 100 times concentrated. Not to mention that this was a high-energy dark energy. As if they were splashed with sulfuric acid, the Apocalypse guards' bodies started to corrode. The thick scales on the skin of these powerful demons, as well as the steel-hard cuticle, all melted away like wet toilet paper. Grom looked at all of this in shock. Fortunately, before the shockwave reached him, the Erida Gemini who was watching over him pressed a button on a pillar that rose from the ground. A powerful ventilation system was activated, and in an instant, the ultra-high-density dark energy gas was drawn out of the hall. Even so, more than 100 Apocalypse guards had been killed. This was the Twisted Void, and the demons that died here were dead. They could no longer be resurrected. The Erida Gemini's expression was very interesting. There was shock, horror, and a hint of anticipation. On the operating table in the middle of the hall, an object that looked like Xueqi slowly stood up. It did not look any different, but the powerful evil aura that came rushing at them told the Erida Gemini. A new elite demon lord was born. Chapter 1000. Initially, the Burning Legion was the fallen titan Sargeras. It was only after Sargeras brought Kill, Jaden and Archimonde into the pit 25,000 years ago that the Burning Legion came into being. Since that day, Kill Jaden had not stopped adding new races to the Burning Legion. After all, the Eridar race was strong, but they were not invincible. It was a waste to use the pure-blooded Eridar race as war consumables. That was how the Doom Guards, Lords of the Abyss, Dreadlords, Cerberus, and other races, as well as evil magic creations such as Hellfire came into being. It was easy to measure the status of a race. It was to see if the race had a peerless elite who could perfectly absorb dark powers. And now there was one more. A human elite from the Andromeda star with mass effect. A moment ago, Xueqi was still a pawn who could let the Eridar twins rule over his life. But now, he was a peerless elite that even Gemini had to treat with respect. Thud! Xueqi stomped on the ground. His legs had grown a lot longer, and he seemed to have lost his balance. Xueqi snorted, and right in front of Gemini, Xueqi quickly reverted to his original size at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a layer of black mist surrounded him, Xueqi took out the robe he had prepared and put it on. From the looks of it, Xueqi seemed to have turned back into the somewhat powerful shadow priest from before. Even the violent and tumbling dark power was quickly withdrawn. Gemini's face was once again filled with shock. The Burning Legion had started their expedition 15,000 years ago, and they had seen as many elites as the stars in the sky. But it was rare to see someone like Xueqi, who could completely control the power the moment he gained it. Most of the powerful creatures relied on their strong physique and large size to forcibly absorb the dark powers into their body and temporarily store it. They did not really digest it. For example, the Lords of the Abyss. All of them had energy leakage, and their high-energy reactions could be easily sensed from thousands of meters away. Who would be like Xueqi, who directly refined the dark powers and fused it with his own soul, and then kept a low profile and withdrew it? Elite. Absolute elite. Thinking of the plan that their boss was about to carry out, Gemini's heart suddenly became fervent. Originally, the selection this time was just a small game played out of boredom. They did not expect to gain anything from it. Who would have thought that they would obtain a Lord-class powerhouse? Compared to male devils, female devils were more cunning, vicious, and merciless. The Eridar twins changed their expressions on the spot. They sauntered over to Xueqi with their mesmerizing cat-like steps, showing off the beautiful curves of their bodies. Yo! Congratulations! You are now the lord of the infernal underworld. The high-rank warlock Aura spoke first. How are you going to thank us, sisters, for the benefactors who discovered you? When Queen Salola spoke, her charming smile and seductive tone made it impossible for people to feel that she was asking for benefits. Instead, it gave people the illusion that she was asking for favor. Xueqi's face, which was filled with pain just a moment ago, also immediately wore a smile. Just as he was about to speak, the door to the hall was rudely pushed open. Bang! Accompanied by the sound of an explosion and dust, a huge devil appeared in front of the group of devils. The lower body of a dragon and the upper body of a fat human formed a sharp contrast. Xueqi and Grom's pupils suddenly shrank. Damn, it's really an old friend. It's actually the Lord of the Abyss, Manaroth. He brought a few Lords of the Abyss over. Hee. You're the new Demon Lord? You don't seem very strong. Luckily, I rushed over after sensing the energy waves. Come, fight with me. If you lose, you'll be my servant. After saying that, Manaroth grinned and revealed his terrifying fangs. He raised his right arm and forcefully slammed the huge double-headed sword into the ground. The metal floor of the hall immediately let out a shocking roar. You! Queen Salola's was furious. What a bastard! The lord that she had just nurtured was snatched away by a boorish lord of the abyss just like that. However, as Archimonde's direct subordinate, Manaroth could really ignore the Gemini, who was killed Jaden's adjutant. On the contrary, it was Elisa's who grabbed her good friend. A demon who can prove himself is a real demon. Thinking of this, Salola smiled. Yes. If he was a weakling who was defeated by his comrade in one move, it was not worth investing in. Although Manaroth was strong, he was also a very good touchstone. If this infernal one did not lose, or even not lose too badly, then he would definitely gain a foothold in the Burning Legion. Thinking of this, Salola's smile became even brighter. Your Excellency Infernal One, it seems that you need to prove yourself immediately. Xueqi smiled. No problem. This is for the Burning Legion. Just like that, Xueqi, dressed in a black robe, walked slowly to stand 20 meters in front of Manaroth. Considering that he was going to face the Burning Legion in this 10,000-year time travel, Xueqi did not wear any of the equipment that he had obtained from Mount Hyjal. He did not have a strong physique, nor did he have any decent equipment. He looked extremely shabby, to the extent that it would affect the appearance of the city. The Apocalypse Guards, who did not have high hopes for Xueqi, suddenly burst into laughter, and then roared in unison. Kaladu! In other words, it was kill, kill, kill. Meant. Every demon longed to see a bloodthirsty, blood-boiling battle. At the very least, a cruel and terrifying slaughter was not a bad thing. The Apocalypse Guards had completely forgotten who had just burned so many Apocalypse Guards to death with just a low-purity demonic aura. Xueqi did not say a word. He raised his right hand and hooked his index finger at Manaroth. Everyone understood what he meant. Come. Don't look down on me. Manaroth was furious. He was really furious. He stomped on the ground with his 4 claws, and with a violent and visually shocking attack, he crossed the distance of 20 meters. It was a terrifying slash that could easily cut 10 Apocalypse Guards in half, and it almost split the Dark Void in half. At this critical moment, when Grom was so nervous that his heart was about to leap out of his throat, dozens of long black chains suddenly appeared in the air. As Xueqi grinned mysteriously, he spat out a few words between his white teeth. Mental Lash, Ultimate. Chapter 1001. At first, Manaroth did not pay much attention to the seemingly weak dark energy whips. From his point of view, it was just a meaningless display. His charge and cleave could destroy everything with brute force. He immediately realized that he was wrong. Furthermore, he was ridiculously wrong. The whips condensed from dark energy were so pure that even the knowledgeable Eridar Gemini was speechless. They were illusory energy bodies that were weaker than gas, but in less than 1,000th of a second, they condensed again and again, turning into black substance that was frighteningly bright even in the dark. 100 times harder than steel. 1,000 times stronger than rubber bands. Their unreasonable strength and tenacity held Manaroth back even though he was in a frenzied state. She grabbed his arm, jamming his elbow, strangling his throat, locking his limbs. The whips of dark power that came from all directions out of nowhere actually stopped the top lord of the abyss, whose weight was measured in tons, as if he had been frozen on the spot, as if he had been turned into a fossil. The gigantic splitting mountain sword was clearly just a centimeter away from cutting Duke's body, cutting this seemingly weak body in half with a single slash. But so close yet so far away. When Manaroth roared and used all his strength, Manaroth shouted. When he roared in anger and wanted to burn his life and soul, when all his strength and the dark energy in his body were exhausted, he still could not move an inch forward. In front of the calm Duque, he was worse than an oversized clown. He was like a bug that knew it was a spider web but still ran into it. It was a joke. He was furious. He cursed. But he did not know that the name of this move was Extreme Mental Whip, and not Binding of Darkness. The pain that surpassed his physical body had already arrived. It was just that the pain was so intense that it instantly burned all the pain nerves in the area where he was bound. He did not feel any pain in his intense struggle. But the next moment, a pain that came from his soul came from every corner of his soul. He finally realized that something was wrong. Ah! It was a pain that surpassed all his previous experiences and all his imagination. Ah! That was the most extreme and terrifying pain that could almost burn his brain to a crisp. No, It was a despair and pain that even his soul, which he believed to be indomitable, would tremble in fear and submit to. Perhaps the pitiful wretches who had angered the 3 titans of the Burning Legion and had their souls imprisoned and roasted for 1,000 years had suffered such a tragic fate. Manaroth, who was famous in the entire army for being able to fight and not afraid of death, had his 4 relatively short hooves give way at the same time. His belly was stuck to the ground as he fainted. Moreover, there was a foul stench coming from the back half of his abdomen. That's right, because this fellow's body model leaned more towards that of a draconic human, his stomach just so happened to be too big, like a roly-poly doll. Just like that, his head slumped dejectedly on his thick neck, his eyes rolling back. My lord! The lords of the abyss turned pale with fright. Magtheridon, who was at the front, brandished his double-headed sword and rushed over to help. Humph! A cold snort. A green shadow rose from the ground and rushed into the sky. In less than a second, it drew an extremely unscientific triangle in the air. It was a flash of mournful red light. It was violent and filled with an unparalleled sense of power. Compared to the violent momentum of the Lord of the Abyss's charge, this scarlet axe was even more unreasonable. Even though Grom was only 1/10 of Magtheridon's size, he had the weird special skill, Lord of the Abyss specialization. One blood roar was enough to teach Magtheridon a lesson. The meter-thick super alloy plate was directly smashed by the axe. Magtheridon was like a pale little girl as he let out an unscientific scream and retreated in panic. King against king. General against general. It seemed like the Lord of the Abyss's side was completely defeated. Duque waved his finger lightly, wanting to end this troublemaker Manaroth. Suddenly, an incomparably powerful will descended. It was a terrifying will that was so huge that it felt like the entire universe was in his hands. A cold glint flashed in Duque's eyes. He waved his finger, and the dark power that bound Manaroth's body suddenly increased. At this moment, most of the spectating demons could not help but change their expressions. This infernal affairs really dared to kill? Humph! A cold snort came from the void. Then, a super-large sword wrapped in blue flame slashed down from the sky, about to cut Duque's dark whip. However, at the very last moment, Duke put on a frightened look and only withdrew his energy the instant before the flaming saber arrived. Oh no! Oh no, even if he kept telling himself that this was 10,000 years ago, when the Burning Legion was at its most powerful. When Duque saw Archimonde's green face run out to scare people, he still felt like he did not press the lid of his coffin properly and let Ak run out. Who are you? Who gave you the right to kill my vanguard general? Archimond's shadow seemed to be unable to suppress his anger. Lord Archimond, as Lord Kil'jaeden's direct subordinate, I don't think I have to tolerate Manarotha's provocation, right? Duque did not back down at all. Instead, he rebuked Archimond. In the Burning Legion, the one with the biggest fist was the boss. However, it was also relative. Since ancient times, this kind of thing happened in any large organization. Anyway, Duque had defeated Manaroth in one move and displayed his value. He dared to bet with his integrity that Kil'jaeden would definitely not bear to let the best newcomer of the year be killed by Archimond in a daze. As expected, in less than half a second, Kil'jaeden's huge image suddenly appeared behind Duque. Hee. Don't be angry, Archimond. Isn't it just a sparring session? Didn't your vanguard official not die? Hearing this, Duque heaved a sigh of relief. He was a talent that Eridar Gemini had discovered. As Kil'jaeden's aide-de-camp, how could these two wicked demonesses let go of this opportunity to claim credit? Needless to say, they must have called Kil'jaeden over. So Kil'jaeden came out to smooth things over, and Duque was not surprised at all. Humph! Archimond gave Duque a hard stare. He would never have dreamed that 10,000 years later, it would be this little bastard in front of him who gave him the final blow. Of course, the guilty Duque had already changed his appearance before he transmigrated. Coupled with the large amount of high-purity dark energy he had absorbed, he had changed his appearance so much that Archimond would not be able to recognize him 10,000 years later. Even if he saw him yesterday, he would not be able to recognize him. Chapter 1002. Archimond, of course, could not do anything when a big boss of the same status as him came to smooth things over. What made Archimond even more depressed was that Duque was clearly not the kind of demon lord who would face him head-on. He did not even have the chance to say that his hands were itchy. As one of the big bosses, he could not possibly be so thick-skinned, right? A snort was already his limit. In a group of demons, one could never expect everyone to live harmoniously like brothers. Not fighting each other was already the greatest restraint. Duque's control over this was simply perfect. How much Archimond disliked Duque was how much Kil'jaeden admired Duque. Ever since he met the Eridar twins, Duque had never thought of relying on the brave Archimond, not even for a short period of time. The move to kill just now was also an act by Duque. This was his proof of allegiance to Kil'jaeden, the chairman egg. Now that he had a proof of allegiance, the chairman egg would accept it. Of course, he would want some rewards for Duque. The red chairman egg smiled and said, "The Burning Legion does not raise useless people. Similarly, every demon must be responsible for their actions. Since Manaroth provoked and failed, shouldn't we give him some rewards?" Humph. After another cold snort, Archimond's huge blue and green figure disappeared on the spot. Duque's eyes narrowed into a line. He was also very curious about what kind of rewards there would be. The Eridar twins twisted their soft waists. Like the same person in the mirror, they walked over from left and right in sync and placed their hands on Duque's shoulders. This is the rule for the Burning Legion's Lord level and above demons. The winner can obtain a Lord level item from the loser, Auras said with a smile. What if the loser can't give it? Duque touched his chin and said thoughtfully, "Then you will become the item that was lost." Queen Salolas's eyes were seductive. Then you will become the item that was lost. Hee, so that's how it is. Interesting. The high-rank warlock Auras continued. All demons who have just become lords and have yet to prove themselves are low-rank lords. Because Manaroth is challenging you as a junior lord, he has to pay 4 times the price. Salolas pointed at Magtheridon, who was bitterly clutching his broken breastplate and trying to make himself less conspicuous. Including Magtheridon, there are still 4 lower-tier lords who have just attacked or are preparing to attack. Middle tier was twice as powerful. In other words, you and your servant can obtain a total of 8 pieces of lord equipment. Magtheridon's face turned green. He looked at his boss, Manaroth, who was still unconscious, and threatened. "Spies, right? Don't be too pleased with yourself. Let me tell you, if you dare to ask us for our collection, we will be enemies. If you can forget what happened today, you will gain the friendship of the Abyssal Lords." When Duque heard this, he suddenly felt like laughing. Laugh if you want to. Who cares if you're an Abyssal Lord or an Abyssal Turtle? Ha ha, ha 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 ha, Ha 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 ha. Duque's unbridled and arrogant laughter echoed in the dark hall. It was like two huge palms slapping the faces of the Abyssal Lords. Every large Abyssal Lord's face was burning. Their muscles kept bulging and relaxing, looking like a unicorn's arm acting up. It was extremely laughable. You don't regret this. We are the strongest vanguard of the Burning Legion. Magtheridon no longer had much confidence. Duque burst out laughing. His arrogant voice had an indescribable demonic charm. Why should I please some trash who can't even defeat me? At first, you wanted to enslave me, but when you can't defeat me, you want to reconcile with me? How can it be so easy? Duque's eyes sharpened. He gently pushed away Eridar's hands that were on his shoulders and took 3 big steps forward. Hand over 8 items that my servant and I can use. Otherwise, I will take them from your corpses. It was in line with the rules. No problem. Moreover, Duque had never thought of joining the Burning Legion. Was he supposed to be like those trash who shouted, "Of course I forgive you," after being cuckolded? Bull**T. Of course I'll take some and leave. I'm going to kill your entire family anyway. I don't care if you hate me or not. Duque was filled with murderous intent. Not only was he in the right, but his fists were also especially big. Not to mention how bitter Magtheridon looked. Something interesting happened again. None of the Abyssal Lords dared to touch the unconscious Manarotha's bag. Instead, a few of them gathered a bunch of items that Duque and Grom could use. Duque was slightly shocked. So the items of a servant belonged to the master? They were probably certain that Manaroth would still exploit them after waking up, so they contributed from the start. At least they wouldn't be punished by their master. Looking at the pile of epic equipment that was emitting a noble purple glow, Duque had to admit that killing and arson was the fastest way to get rich since ancient times. However, these Abyssal Lords had robbed countless planets to get their hands on top-grade equipment, and now they were all in Duque's hands. It was worth mentioning that the good items of Magtheridon and the others were slightly different from the original ones in history. They were not slightly lower than Mount Hygel's, but on the same level. This made Duque feel a little more excited. Apart from the pieces of equipment he got from Nethario, this was the best equipment he could get his hands on at the moment. Duque did not hesitate to choose a crystal pulse staff first. That's right, he had Argus Apostle before, but the problem was that it was Archimonde's treasure. Duque did not know if Archimonde already had this thing 10,000 years ago. If he did, then Duque would be courting death by taking it out. At the moment when he urgently needed to increase his combat power, the crystal pulse staff was a good transition. Anyway, there were only 5 suitable items, so it would be a waste not to take them. The Abyssal Hunter's cloak and the Soul Eater's gauntlet were 2 pieces of cloth armor. The key was the 2 magnificent Abyssal Lord's pockets, which were 2 high-level spatial bags with a space of 200 cubic meters. It was completely different from the old Azeroth goods that Duque had used before, which were only 5 cubic meters in size. He did not expect to get such a reward from dealing with Manaroth. Duque laughed so hard that his stomach cramped. On the other hand, Grom had obtained 3 pieces of plate armor, which happened to be different from the ones he had obtained before. If he could return alive, he would definitely be able to create a set of gorgeous equipment that would blind most of the warriors of the tribe. Chapter 1003. A group of demons looked at him with jealousy and hatred as he collected his spoils of war. And the same group of demons looked at him with even more jealousy and hatred as the demonic craftsman forged his spoils of war into a suitable size, and then equipped it on the spot. Even the cost of adjusting the equipment was paid by the sullen lords of the abyss. Not to mention the sour feeling in Duque's heart. He had slapped the demon in the face. He had snatched the demon's best. And he had even shamelessly asked for a receipt and 3 guarantees of after-sale service. This was the so-called despicable and despicable act. If Duque had really become a demon from today onwards, then it would have been fine. But the problem was that he had been prepared to run from the start. Of course Grom, who still had no idea what Duque was up to, was very depressed. He did not even know if Duque had really fallen. Originally, the Eridar Gemini's eyes had lit up when they saw Grom, who had almost crippled Magtheridon with an axe, and subtly suggested that Grom should also try his dark powers. But Duque had used the excuse that lower races do not deserve to enjoy dark powers to gloss over it. The Gemini did not force Duque any further. Firstly, Grom was Duque's servant, slave. Secondly, Perhaps he thought that Xueqi wanted to consolidate his power and position? Jealousy and being wary of his underlings were things that any smart Eridar demon would do. The Gemini smiled and did not continue the topic. Then, Xueqi was led to an independent, sealed room. It was a huge space of 100 square meters, and there was only one luxurious chair in the middle of the room. Calling it a chair was not really appropriate, as the entire chair was made out of high-purity dark power that was so dense that it was almost tangible. It was more like an exaggerated, spiritual transmission system. Under the Gemini's guidance, Xueqi sat on it, and the next moment, he found that his consciousness had been transferred to a huge hall. It was a huge fan-shaped space of over 1,000,000 square meters. At first glance, it looked like an opera house. However, there were only 3 gigantic chairs on the platform, which were obviously for the Burning Legion's 3 powerhouses. Then, from the narrow end of the fan-shaped room, Xueqi saw a 4-digit number of chairs, or rather, cushions. His current position happened to be slightly behind the middle section of the fan. Sololas's voice rang in Xueqi's ears. This is the Temple of Demons, the core of the Burning Legion. As you have successfully defeated the High Lord Manaroth, you have been promoted from a beginner lord to an intermediate lord. If you want to advance further, you must make a great contribution and prove your loyalty to the army. After you prove your loyalty, you can officially reincarnate as a vassal of our noble Eridar clan. Your soul will be bound to the twisting nether and you will enjoy eternal life. As long as you don't die in the twisting void, your soul can return here and resurrect infinitely. When Xueqi heard this, he was instantly excited. Not because of eternal life, but because he had been worried for a long time that he had to bind his soul in advance. This loophole was not deliberately left behind by the Burning Legion. They just never thought that there would be a creature in this world that could resist such terrible mental corruption. In the eyes of Sargeras and the Eridar clan, anyone who could withstand such a large amount of dark energy and become a lord would already be a miracle if they did not fall into madness. Generally speaking, such a person would be given the responsibility of a commander. Who would have thought that there would be someone who could resist the brainwashing and secretly convert dark energy? So in their eyes, Xueqi was a cooked duck that could not fly away. Eternal life was, of course, a deceptive thing to be used as bait to tempt the strong newbies who had just joined the army. As for resurrecting in the twisting void and falling into a weakened state, other demons would find trouble with him, and he might even become a slave beast. Do you expect the demons to be kind enough to tell you the truth? Hee. After the introduction of the benefits, it was time to work. Without giving Xueqi time to rest, Kil'jaeden summoned Xueqi. It was a house burning with a raging fire. Kil'jaeden was red all over, and his lower body was bathed in boiling magma. His body was more than 15 meters tall, and easily occupied most of the room. Xueqi stood in the middle of the room, standing at the end of the peninsular-shaped passage that only extended to Kil'jaeden's chest. Looking up at Kil'jaeden, Xueqi felt a little pain in the ass. Nothing else, it was too close. Looking up at Boss Egg's scarlet demon face that was made up of 3 flexible tentacles at such a close distance, it was a disgusting feeling. It was like spending a lot of money to watch an IMAX movie, only to sit in the first row and spit at the alien show. The feeling of being burnt on the outside and tender on the inside was really unpleasant. Unfortunately, Xueqi, who was pretending to be an obedient child, could only pinch his nose and accept it. Dark in his shadow form, Xueqi stared at the egg with a slightly timid gaze as he pretended to be calm, and said, "The great Kil'jaeden, what brings you here?" "Who knew?" Boss Egg would immediately say. "Despicable bug! How dare you lie to me?" Xueqi's body trembled, and he almost peed his pants. "The great Kil'jaeden? I didn't." This time, it wasn't an act. Xueqi was really scared. "Humph. You still dare to say you didn't? There's no Andromeda star effect at all." Hua hearing this, Xueqi was instantly relieved. The true colors of the best actor were revealed once again. Duke's mouth moved as if he was probing. "The planet I was born on was just an inferior world with a low civilization. The Great Burning Legion destroyed my world in one day. Mass Effect Planet is just what my lowly race and I call it. I don't know what the Great Burning Legion called my world. Is there a misunderstanding?" Kil'jaeden was speechless. The Burning Legion was the most brutal existence in the universe, the most terrifying violent organization. The number of planets and races they had destroyed was more than 10 million. Even if their subordinates reported, they would usually destroy an entire star system. Even someone as meticulous and cunning as Jaden couldn't possibly know what kind of culture each planet had, and what the inferior races called their home. The egg would never pay attention to planets that were easily destroyed. Generally speaking, knowing how much resources were taken from planets that were easily destroyed was already the limit of the egg's memory. Jaden was actually just trying to scare Xueqi. Seeing that this new Lord-level vassal creature was sufficiently humble towards him, Jaden was relieved. Chapter 1004. Jaden was a big boss who had a lot of things to deal with every day. He didn't have the time to beat around the bush with Duke. After all, Duke was one of them, so he went straight to the point. I'm here to give you a mission. Go to a planet called Azeroth and open a portal that allows the entire army to pass through. As long as you complete this, not only will you be able to bind your soul to the twisting nether, but you will also be able to choose one item from my collection as your family heirloom. Hearing this, Xueqi was so happy that his heart was about to fly out of his chest. Damn, he was finally sure that that bastard Nozdormu did not send him at the wrong time. It was indeed the eve of the ancient war 10,000 years ago, and if he was not wrong, he was very likely to replace Manarotha's position. Although he was happy, Xueqi showed another characteristic. I promised to complete the mission. I only have one small question. You ask, I may not answer. Jaden showed enough arrogance. I want to ask, sir, did you give me your reward the moment I opened the portal? Xueqi rubbed his hands, his face full of eagerness like the greediest goblin. This time, Xueqi's desire was not fake. According to normal history, he would only have the chance to overthrow Jaden and snatch his mother after at least 10 years. He did not expect to have the chance to get Dandan's collection in advance. It would be strange if Xueqi was not tempted. This kind of undisguised greed made Jaden admire him greatly. Haha! The Burning Legion is never stingy with rewards. As long as the portal you open is large and stable enough, when the main force of the Burning Legion's first fleet enters Azeroth, how about I reward you with 3 treasures? Then it's a deal? Jaden seemed to be satisfied with this meeting. He waved his hand, and a scorching fen wind rose in the room. If the dark force surrounding Xueqi was slightly weaker, Xueqi would have been a charred corpse by now. You have my promise. Go and rest first. You also need to adapt to the sudden increase in power in your body. My aide will give you the details tomorrow. Xueqi bowed deeply to Dandan and retreated. The moment Xueqi retreated, the Eridar twins appeared on the 2 floating platforms. What do you think? Jaden put on a fake smile. Every breath he took was accompanied by a huge amount of flames. Smart, sharp, ruthless, insightful, and shrewd. If he's from the Eridar tribe, then he'll definitely be an outstanding demon, Alyssa said. One thing to note, he's very greedy. I sensed that he had an almost twisted obsession with exquisite equipment. Hee. Queen Salolas let out a pleasant chuckle. Not only that, although he hid it well and never dared to look us in the eye, I'm sure that he wants to enslave us. Auras also chuckled. Ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Jaden laughed maniacally. His laughter was so loud and terrifying that it actually shattered the decorations in the hall and the stone pillars hanging at the top of the hall. They fell into the lava pool and splashed high into the air. The Eridar twins bowed at the same time with a charming smile on their faces. Those inferior races that were destroyed by our hands call us demons. Since we're demons, what's wrong with being greedy? What's wrong with destroying? What's wrong with trying to dominate everything in the world? Remember, it's never desire that's wrong. The only mistake is that you don't have enough power to satisfy your own desire. Ha 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 ha. The twins lowered their heads even more. They had already confirmed that their master had a good impression of the new lord of the inferior race, the infernal affairs. However, as a demon commander who was good at scheming, Jaden was never stingy with his generous rewards, as long as you could complete his extremely harsh requirements. Furthermore, how could demons put all their eggs in one basket? On the other side, he retreated from the reception room. Under the guidance of a succubus, Xueqi first rejected the succubus' invitation to spend a wonderful night together, then directly returned to the suite that was arranged for him. In the living room that was filled with a sci-fi atmosphere, he saw the anxious Gromhel scream. Infernal affairs. Master. Lord Howl, who was never a qualified actor, clearly knew that he was acting, called the master in an extremely obscure manner. Xueqi's face was cold as he proudly replied, Mantis shrimp. I know that you've never accepted me. You don't recognize me as your master. This doesn't matter, I will make you kneel down in front of my power one day with a wholehearted heart. No matter what you want to ask, I don't have the time to answer you. Right now, I've received a mission from one of the highest commanders of the Burning Legion, Xueqi. I need to go to Azeroth. If you have any questions, go to Azeroth and talk. With that, Xueqi flicked his sleeves and left in a domineering manner. His left hand pressed on the spherical button on the side of the door, and the glass-like sphere emitted a burst of green light. Then the door to the bedroom opened, and Xueqi strode in. Before the door closed, Xueqi's words floated out. I'm going to rest. Don't disturb me before Kill Jaden's adjutant arrives. The door seemed to be closing slowly, but it was actually closing very quickly. Grom, who seemed to be in a daze, was left behind in the middle of the hall. But in fact, his heart was already in turmoil. Wait until we get back to Azeroth? Is there someone watching here? But doesn't that mean Xueqi is fine? He's fine. I've already fallen into madness after being stained with that little bit of demonic blood. He absorbed so much dark energy, and he's still able to maintain his sense of self. Grom stood with his right hand on his left chest, listening to his heartbeat and savoring the bitterness in his mouth. Suddenly, he raised his head 45 degrees and stared at the distorted void outside the porthole. His throat gurgled. It's so hard to not be able to repay a debt of gratitude. Grom was no longer young. Although in the eyes of his compatriots, he was a great hero whose name was engraved on Orgrimmar's newly erected hero monument, a living legend. Only he himself felt that he, who had wrongly encouraged everyone to drink the demonic blood, did not deserve the title of great hero. Thinking back to the time when he fought against Manaroth, he survived thanks to Xueqi's help. After that day, he had a very mysterious feeling. Not only did he escape a curse that was destined to lead to tragedy, but he also seemed to have broken the noose of fate. It was a vague feeling of fate. But his intuition, which had never been wrong in his life, told him that it was correct. Chapter 1005. He had thought countless times about helping Dooku and repaying the debt he owed to a human. Then he, who did not owe the other party anything, could die peacefully on the battlefield. Who knew that he would be saved by Xueqi time and time again. Now, he had no choice but to shamelessly act like a coward in front of the evil demons and endure the humiliation. It was to return to 10,000 years in the future and report to Sar. Perhaps this humiliation was completely meaningless. Because once the evil demons found out, he would definitely die a horrible death. Now, Xueqi was so powerful. He had not fallen, but he had tricked so many evil demons. He had even tricked the cunning Burning Legion's commander, Kill Jaden. He could return to Azeroth soon. What a hopeful ending this was. Even though he was in the enemy camp, he could not help me at all. Yet, he still chose to help me, gave me hope, and gave me the responsibility to lead my people back. Xueqi, you are too generous. How do you expect me to repay you? As expected, only a great hero like you can truly lead Azeroth to the future? For some reason, even though Grom wanted to cry, he laughed. Ha ha ha, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. He laughed loudly, impudently, and bleakly. He had the boldness of a beast man. He also had the rich emotions that humans should have. Just like that, Grom could not sleep for the entire night. The next morning, the Eridar Gemini came. On the surface, the explanation was that the army wanted to snatch the Well of Eternity from the uncivilized low-class races. But what was in Azeroth and its connection to the Pantheon was not mentioned. As the saying went, everything that should be said was said without missing a word, and everything that should not be said was left unsaid. Even though he flattered Xueqi by saying that opening the teleportation portal would be considered a great contribution to the army, he knew that he was just a pawn to explore the path. It would be good if he succeeded. If not, he would just lose a non-Eridar lord. The Burning Legion had a 4-digit number of lords. Xueqi wouldn't make a difference whether he was there or not. An hour later, in the middle of the ancient Kalimdor continent on planet Azeroth, a glorious city was displaying its boundless charm in the night sky. Even the wind and rain could not conceal the magnificent radiance of this city. Azhara was a great city that was closest to the Well of Eternity in ancient times. The Night Elves used the power of the Eternal Well to build the Queen's capital city. Unlike Surlama, the high elves living in Azhara did not worship the moon goddess Alun. Instead, they blindly worshipped the power of arcane magic. Because of this, they slowly alienated themselves from nature. Cenarius and the other demigods and druids were not welcomed here. The high elves wanted magnificent city buildings and arcane magic. They believed that the power of magic could rule over everything. In Galhala, a great city some distance away from Azhara. Although it did not have the tall and majestic forbidden palace of Azhara, it did not have the magical combination of stone and wood. But what Galhala possessed was enough to make all the elven druids in Surlama unable to sleep. On this stormy night, there was a mysterious air around it. Those who knew what it represented did not even dare to stare at the palace-like mage tower in the center of the city. People all shifted their gazes to avoid attracting the attention of the guards. Around the mage tower, the guards wore green armor and carried spears and swords as they carefully looked around. Not only did they monitor the outside of the city for trespassers, but they also paid special attention to the movements inside from time to time. Especially the main tower. They seemed to have sensed that an unpredictable mysterious power was being nurtured. Not enough, not enough. Not enough at all. You bunch of idiots. When are you going to let that great existence descend? Savis was a powerful arcanist and a fanatic who was most obsessed with arcane magic and various mysterious powers. 10,000 years later, the forbidden experiments that the night elves, high elves and humans had strictly forbidden were not a problem at this point in time. As a noble high elf noble and the queen's chief advisor, all of his experiments were approved by the queen. Under his leadership, the wizards of Galhala began a ritual that was performed every night. In order to complete the ritual, they had to constantly rearrange the magic jades and arcane crystals to demarcate the boundaries of magic power so that the magic power could better play the role of the summoning circle. Suddenly, there was movement between the crystals. Like a protective circle that was suddenly attacked, a few shields of light suddenly rose above the crystals. Unfortunately, the light disappeared in a flash. The crystals that were once filled with powerful magic power dimmed in large pieces. Although the wizards of Galhala were not as proficient in magic as the moon guards, they knew very well that what was happening now should not have happened. They immediately began to check the arrangement again and again, but still could not understand what was wrong. They don't seem to be absorbing magic power from the Well of Eternity, a young cursemancer said. A young cursemancer asserted, something is trying to cut off the energy flow from the front. Trash. Trash. All trash. Savis could no longer control his anger and lashed out at the young cursemancer's face. Even though the cursemancer had more than 10 methods to avoid or resist this whip, he still lowered his head and forcibly endured this whip, leaving behind a deep red mark on his rather delicate and pretty face. Suddenly, Savis quivered. His expression became absent-minded. Yes, he heard a voice. Although it was a little vague, he heard all the keywords clearly. My servant. I will send out a lord to assist you. A powerful lord, huh? That's great. I've been worrying about not being able to show Her Majesty the Queen the great power of the Burning Legion. Is there anything you need me to do? Let go of your soul. Enter a deep sleep. All right. Yes, great Lord Kil'jaeden. Under the strange gazes of all the magi, Savis actually fell asleep standing. He lowered his head and looked like he was on the verge of collapsing, as if he would fall to the ground in the next second. However, Savis moved. His slender fingers fluttered incessantly, and his intense movements formed a stark contrast with his blank expression. Lord. A magus cautiously approached Savis. They could not imagine what had happened to Savis. Chapter 1006. One by one, crystals brimming with mysterious magic were thrown out by Savis's dexterous hands, and they landed lightly on the ground. It looked no different from the magic circle that had failed before, but the order in which the crystals were laid out had clearly caused a special reaction that was different from the past. The magic circle lit up. A green brilliance that had never been seen before began to fill the entire magic circle, and powerful magic meandered around. Brighter! 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 The next moment, a huge black shadow that was more than 10 meters tall suddenly cut through the void and descended from the sky. With an ear-piercing roar of thunder and lightning, it appeared majestically in the middle of the magic circle. Savis and the night elf sorcerers who had just woken up from their trance were stunned. They had completely lost their ability to speak as they stared at the huge figure, oblivious to everything else. It had huge bat wings like a giant dragon, sharp claws, and a body that was many times more muscular than a troll. From the head that was sunk deep in the shadow, two scarlet eyes with a gaze like lightning, fierce and lifelike. It was like the most arrogant emperor, looking down at these night elf arcanists as if they were ants. It smiled. In its open mouth, there were thousands of sharp fangs of various sizes, emitting the most primitive terror. What was even more terrifying was its aura. It was majestic like a collapsing mountain, like a falling star. It was as if just by standing there, it could squeeze the air out of the lungs of the night elves bit by bit, and they could no longer inhale the slightest bit of oxygen. It was a terror that was close to suffocating, but Savis felt that his heart was not because of a lack of oxygen, but because of ecstasy. That's right. Powerful. Only this kind of power was worthy of being the messenger of the supreme existence in his heart. A lord of the burning legion. At that moment, Savis's eyes were filled with tears of excitement. The intense magical wave finally subsided. What appeared in front of them was indeed a gigantic and terrifying pure black giant. Beside him was a rather tall and burly green silhouette. Unfortunately, the giant was too huge, and the elf subconsciously ignored the green figure beside him. Was it a dark energy lord? Or a dread lord? There was an irrepressible excitement in Sava's heart. However, in front of all the elves, the huge black figure seemed to have exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and shrunk rapidly, turning into a humanoid creature that was slightly shorter than the night elves. Moreover, his aura was quickly fading away. Human. Savis couldn't hide his astonishment. In his impression, creatures with this appearance were called humans. They were a group of barbarians who basically did not wear any clothes or used a piece of dirty animal skin to cover their lower bodies. This human did not look powerful, nor did he have any outstanding appearance. Perhaps he was tall among humans, but compared to the taller night elves, his appearance wasn't an advantage. Instead, the 2.5-meter-tall green giant behind this human stood out. A magus who looked rather experienced suddenly sneered. "Lord Savis, is this the Lord that you summoned from the distant, distorted void without hesitation at the expense of a huge amount of magic crystals?" Anyone could hear the sarcasm in the old warlock's words. But before Savis could speak, the young-looking human gently snapped his fingers. For some reason, even though the night elves' ears did not hear any sound, there was a huge tremor that went straight into the hearts of all the elves from the old warlock's head. Bam! If one had to give an onomatopoeic word, that would be it. This was not any type of physical attack, and it had nothing to do with arcane spells. It was a pure spiritual attribute. It easily shook this old warlock, who was considered one of the top-ranked warlocks in the Azhara dynasty, to the point that he was dizzy on the spiritual level. The old warlock was horrified and tried to retreat. Just then, the green monster suddenly raised a huge one-handed axe high, and a scarlet light flashed. The double magical shield that wrapped around the old warlock was as fragile as an eggshell, and was easily broken. In the next moment, two long legs dressed in luxurious fabrics were sent flying. But the old warlock's remaining body completely defied the laws of physics, and even after receiving the horizontal impact, everything above the knee was still stuck straight into the ground. No, the bones that were already exposed were actually forcefully inserted into the obsidian ground. The old warlock did not faint, but every curve on his face was condensed with fear, and every inch of his eyes was filled with despair. That scene was truly evil. A wave of fear that came from the deepest depths of their souls froze the bodies of every night elf present, including Savis. Only then did the Lord speak slowly, and he was surprisingly fluent in Kadoriai. "There have been countless beings who have tried to look down on me with their height. But every time I've closed the gap between us, no one would dare to look at me like that anymore. Remember, Savis, if anyone dares to do this again, I'll cut off everything above the neck." As soon as he said that, all the elves in the surroundings felt a sudden impact on their spirit seas. That was planets destroyed one after another. Millions upon millions of slaughtered creatures. At the same time, they let out howls of despair. No elf could withstand such a terrifying spiritual impact. In an instant, there was no one left standing in the summoning hall other than the Lord and the burly green figure. After a while, Savis, covered in sweat as if he had been fished out of the water, actually scrambled over and prostrated himself in front of the powerful Lord of the Burning Legion. 100,000 apologies. These lowly mortals actually dared to offend the dignity of the Legion. "As long as you give the order, I'll definitely sacrifice the lives and souls of these offenders to the Legion. Savis abandoned all restraint and dignity, and kept kowtowing with great humility. Humph! The Lord waved his hand lightly, and the once powerful old warlock suddenly turned into a large human-shaped torch, bathed in demonic green flames. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to scream, and even the surrounding elves could hear the tragic cries coming from his soul. But in that mouth, in his throat, in his vocal cords, not a single tremor could be produced. Just like that, he turned into ashes in a mere few seconds. The Lord spoke. My name is Infernal Affairs. But a name is just a code. You can also call me Mark Dooku. Chapter 1007. Who was Savis? A Breaking Dawn powerhouse. The second most powerful person in the Kador Empire. The first favorite of Queen Azhara. The famous king of nightmares in later generations. It could be said that he was the biggest spy in the ancient war, and also one of the most important figures in the Corps. However, such a powerful figure was currently lying on the ground, shivering. He didn't even dare to raise his head to look at Xueqi. If Xueqi could return to the modern era immediately, he would be able to brag about this for the rest of his life. Grom, who was behind Xueqi, was also dumbfounded. He was really a little confused. Seeing this, even the brave and loyal Grom couldn't help but have doubts again. Has Xueqi fallen? Is he using his memories from before he fell to control me? Or is he not fallen, and is still acting? Grom's anxiety to know the truth was almost burning his heart. Unfortunately, he couldn't do anything. He could only use his identity as Xueqi's lackey to continue threatening the Night Elves with his sinister mouth. Xueqi continued to play his role as the greater demon lord. Right in front of Savis he said coldly, "Raise your head and look at me." "Yes." Savis trembled as he raised his head. "You too." "Yes." Under the gaze of Savis and the group of elven magi, Xueqi seemed to be moving in slow motion, turning his skin into an illusory black that was as dark as ink inch by inch. This shadow form, which was very common in the future, was something that had never been heard of before. In his black form, Xueqi's gaze was as sharp as a sword, fiercely cutting into Savi's face and heart. "I am the greater demon lord of the Burning Legion, Infernal Affairs. What I know is only death and destruction. So don't try to challenge my authority in any way. Otherwise, be prepared for at least one city to be destroyed. Understood?" Understood. Savis was so scared that he almost wet his pants, and hurriedly agreed. "Give me a moon well that hasn't been dirted. I want to take a bath." "Yes. Yes. Yes." Savis hurriedly nodded. Without even looking at Sarvis, Xueqi deactivated shadow form and strode away. Grom followed behind Xueqi with blood roar on his shoulder. At this moment, Savis eagerly followed, nodding and bowing. "Great Seamless. Call me by my temporary name, Mark." Xueqi corrected. "Sir Mark, I am carrying out this summoning ritual in the name of Queen Azhara. Do you have time to meet the Queen?" Xueqi stopped, releasing an astonishing aura of power without anger. His gaze was so fierce that Savis actually had a terrifying, dazed feeling that Xueqi's eyes were blooming with the light of death, easily breaking his body into two. "Are you ordering me?" "No. I dare not." Savis once again knelt on the ground with incomparable humility. "This is just a suggestion. A small suggestion." Xueqi was secretly pleased, but unfortunately, he could not show it on his face. He still looked domineering as he snorted coldly. "I'm not in the mood for now. But seeing that you're still relatively obedient, I'll give this to you." With that, Xueqi threw out a few tubes that looked like test tubes flowing with green fluorescence. Savis hurriedly caught them. "This is... Give it to your enemy to drink. Just one drop, and you'll get the powerful warrior you want." "Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir." Savis simply could not contain the ecstasy in his heart. He actually shamelessly crawled over and kissed Xueqi's right shoe. When he kissed for the third time, a look of disgust appeared on Xueqi's face. He withdrew his foot like lightning and kicked Savis in the face, leaving a pitch-black shoe print on this night elf noble's face. "Scram. Lead the way." "Yes, yes, yes." Savis, the man who had brought great disasters to Azeroth many times in history, was now serving Xueqi like the most loyal servant. Grom, who was behind Xueqi, was dumbfounded and did not know what to say. At this point in time, the Kaldorei Empire had overused the water from the Well of Eternity. The Well of Eternity had long since turned into ink, and even rats were unwilling to drink the water. Fortunately, before the Well of Eternity had been polluted, there were still many moon wells that had cut off their connection to the Well of Eternity and maintained their purity. This was the case in a royal villa located 30 kilometers west of Galhalla. Savis worshipped Xueqi and Grom as if they were gods, and let a large group of royal guards lead the way. Guarding beside Xueqi were the famous moon guards of the Kaldorei Empire, who cultivated both magic and martial arts. After leading Xueqi and Grom into this magnificent royal villa filled with arcane decorations and appliances, Savis tactfully left behind 12 beautiful but short elven maidservants and left respectfully. "My lord, please rest first. I will visit you again tomorrow at noon." Xueqi waved his hand impatiently as he dismissed Savis like a fly. His gaze then fell on the maidservants who were forcing a smile but were actually trembling. Perhaps Xueqi had asked Grom to shorten the height of the old elf wizard's legs, but it had left a deep impression on Savis. Savis had actually managed to find 12 elven maidservants who were slightly shorter than Xueqi. This was a very rare thing. One should know that the night elves had evolved from trolls, and the average height of the ancient night elves was more than 1.9 meters. The poor Xueqi had grown taller after adulthood, and after absorbing dark energy for a second growth spurt, he was only 1.85 meters. This was not bad for a human's height, but for the night elves, he was still half a head shorter. Xueqi almost wanted to say, "I'm in despair too." The 12 night elf maidservants, if not for their purplish skin color and the annoying facial wrinkles on Xueqi's face, would have been a good eye candy. The problem was that Xueqi had a belly full of secrets, and Grom's patience was almost at its limit. He could only say, "You may leave. I don't need your service." But the maidservant who seemed to be the head of the maidservants said bitterly. Xueqi threatened, "Do you see my servant's fangs? He's an out-and-out ferocious race. Once he goes berserk and eats you up, don't blame me for not warning you." The pitiful elf girl retreated in a panic, leaving the dumbfounded Grom behind. Grom almost wanted to curse. "Damn it, when did I eat someone?" Ignoring Grom, Xueqi quickly set up a magic circle and then soaked in the moon well like he was in a hot spring. The mysterious and strange prayer immediately echoed above the moon well. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. Chapter 1008. As someone who had witnessed a miracle with his own eyes, Grom knew that Xueqi had the ability to resist the darkness. This was also the biggest psychological support that kept him going. Even though he had seen it once, when Grom saw it again, he could not suppress the excitement in his heart. His large heart was beating wildly in his wide chest. On the arm that was tightly holding on to blood roar, the veins were bulging like earthworms. Gritting his teeth and holding his breath, Grom did not dare to miss a single detail of Xueqi. He was afraid that Xueqi's conversion to darkness would fail, and he would truly degenerate into a terrifying leader of the Burning Legion. On Xueqi's chest, a golden flame suddenly appeared. Like the first spark on a dry grassland, the golden flames quickly engulfed Xueqi's entire body like a prairie fire. Grom could see with his naked eyes that the dark power of darkness was being burned and purified. The darkness on Xueqi's body retreated like a defeated army, until it reached the area above Xueqi's neck. On his neck, the dark power which had already turned dark, did not retreat, clashing fiercely with the power of light. Two powerful forces that mortals could only look up to, with the arteries and veins on Xueqi's neck as the battlefield, began an unimaginable slaughter. At that moment, Grom suddenly noticed that the water level in the well was dropping rapidly. The water level in the moon well the size of a baseball field was dropping at a rate of 1 centimeter per second. It was as if a whirlpool had appeared on Xueqi's body, and with an imposing manner, he sucked in the pure and flawless well water through his pores. 3 seconds later, Xueqi suddenly vomited. Blarg! Not only did he vomit, but thick black ink was also gushing out of Xueqi's nostrils, ears, and even his tear ducts. Ugh! It was a very strange scene. The well water that was sucked into Xueqi's side was pure white, and the side that he vomited on was absolutely black. The well water swirled clockwise, creating a mystical pattern similar to the Taoist yin-yang fish, Taiji diagram. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt a sense of awe and anticipation rose in his heart. As a former victim of the devil's blood, Grom was very clear on how chaotic that berserk power was. It was impossible for it to have this kind of behavior that was clearly on the side of order. Could it be that Xueqi, this monstrous human super genius, could even conquer the terrifying dark power of the Burning Legion? As Grom's thoughts ran wild, Xueqi's path of being a fraud continued. Light comes from darkness, and from darkness comes light. The tune was even more divine than the brainwashing divine tune. After more than 10 minutes, the black sesame paste that Xueqi spat out finally became a sesame paste demon, and Xueqi became a sanctimonious priest wearing the skin of a holy golden priest. Looking at Xueqi walking down the stairs beside the moon well like the most devout believer, Grom had a strange expression on his face. He touched his coarse beard and asked, "Xueqi, you finally converted the darkness in your body?" Xueqi smiled bitterly. "You could say that, but you've been through it. You know that even if most of it is gone, there will always be some left." Grom's respect for Xueqi grew. 2 times. The first time was when he dealt with Arc Heron. The second time was when he fought the dark power alone. Each time, Xueqi had chosen to sacrifice himself when he had a choice. Grom used to be tortured by the demon blood in his dreams, and he often woke up from his sleep because he could not suppress the violence in his heart. He was very clear about the side effects of the demon's power, so he did not dare to let any of his compatriots get close to him while he was sleeping for so many years. Because he was afraid that he would tear his compatriots apart while he was unconscious. Feeling Grom's sympathetic gaze, Xueqi could only smile bitterly. If Grom's characteristic was anger, then Xueqi had all 7 sins. But due to his easygoing nature, most of the 7 sins had nothing to do with Xueqi, except cough. Xueqi waved his hand at Grom. "I'm fine. Compared to the survival of the world and the continuation of history, my business is trivial." Then, Duke told Grom a bunch of bullshit tea that even he didn't believe. "Remember, we are here on behalf of the Dragon of Time, Nosdormu, to preserve the original appearance of history." "Ha! Am I sure I'm not here to destroy history? In our time, the High Elves were a race that had been destroyed. The capital of the Kaldorii Empire was also blown up. Even if our ultimate goal is to save planet Azeroth, it does not mean that we are going to stop the Burning Legion." "Nonsense. If we really did stop it, how could I steal equipment from Kill Jaden? So, what we need to do is to go with the original development of history. It's fine if you don't know Azeroth's history. Just listen to me. Good boy. Don't mess around. Don't be rash. I'll take you to steal equipment later." Grom's eyes reddened at Xueqi's words. The orc hero nodded heavily. "Yes. I'll listen to you." "Good." The dupe succeeded. Early the next morning, Xueqi had already sensed that Savis had been waiting outside. He paced back and forth anxiously, looking excited and nervous. The test tubes that Xueqi had given him had probably succeeded. Xueqi just had to leave him hanging. Every time Savis couldn't restrain himself and sent the pale elven girls to ask in whispers, "Has Lord Infernal Affairs woken up yet?" he would send the fiendish Grom to stop them without any makeup. "No. Don't talk nonsense. I'll eat you if you keep talking." This caused every single elf girl to go back in tears. At noon, Duke, who was putting on airs, finally called in a few pale elf ladies to help him change his clothes. Then, after he finished eating the various delicacies specially prepared by the high elf chef, he called Savis in for a chat, as though he was calling a fortune. "Great. Great Lord Mark Dooku." Savis was still humble and submissive, prostrating himself on all 4s. He didn't skimp on anything. Xueqi was happy to see this bastard who had betrayed his empire, his master, and the planet. Xueqi raised his eyelids slightly. "What is it? My lord. The medicine you gave me is indeed miraculous. After seeing the results, my emperor was very happy. However, this is only for the enemy. Is there anything that can increase our strength?" "That." Savis also knew that Queen Azhara's request was a little too much, but he did not dare to disobey the request of the woman he deeply admired. Chapter 1009. Xueqi let out a mocking laugh, looking as if he had expected this from him. He then pointed his finger into the distance. "That pool over there is a strength potion specially made for you lot." Grom, the lousy actor, almost lost his act when he heard that. "Bloody hell, this is clearly your vomit from last night. And you have the cheek to say that it's a good stuff specially made for the night elves? No, no, no. This can't be the Duque I know. Could I have been fooled by his holy light? Why does it feel like the Righteous Alliance hero Duke Marcus, who would always act righteously, whether it was tricking his enemies or saving his own in times of danger, had changed so much? Is this really the influence of dark energy? Speaking of which, even the wild boars in the barren lands, which are said to have no fear of meat or fish, would not eat the disgusting black stuff in this pool. Would the night elves want this? Grom's grimace gave Duque a headache. He thought to himself, Grom, have you misunderstood something? I've always been faithful, and I've always been this unscrupulous. What you saw before, what you believed, was just an illusion of an old man like you. Grom had already mentally prepared himself that Savis would fly into a rage when he saw the pool and flip the table. When that happened, he would have to teach this fellow a lesson. Grom knew very well that as a powerful Breaking Dawn Arcanist, Savis did not have many chances to fight. It was very likely that there would only be one chance. Just as Lord Roar was ready to fight, something happened that made Lord Roar break down. Ah, this power! It's wonderful! Savis was like a starving wild dog that saw a steaming pile of shit when his stomach was rumbling. He almost pounced on it. Ignoring the rain, Savis leaned against the side of the pool, his palms pressed against the decorative porcelain, looking like he wanted to take off his clothes and jump in. How could Grom, who was ready to beat someone up, look at this? Master Ho's face was about to crumble. Duque's whisper of the wind reached Grom's ears unhurriedly. You don't understand the so-called High Elves' obsession with power. For the sake of magic, they've already turned the Well of Eternity blacker than coal. Therefore, this color and this degree of evil are nothing. Ah, is that even possible? Grom's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. If Savis was the only one acting like this, then it could be said that Savis and Duque were putting on a show together. However, the two elven arcanists who came with Savis also stretched their necks, looking as if they couldn't wait to rush over and see what was going on. They were very excited by that pool of black sesame paste. All right. You city people, oh Pharaoh, really know how to have fun. Anyway, we, who play with axes, don't understand. Grom was finally convinced. Duque wasn't bluffing. At that moment, in Azhara City hundreds of kilometers away, the storm had caused the dark lake water in the Well of Eternity to become turbulent, as if it was surging. In the distance, it set off a huge wave that almost covered the Azhara Palace. The black waves roared and slapped each other in the air, bursting with arcane energy. In the sky, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled as if 1,000 violent dragons were charging from the shore. As someone who had just teleported from the palace and witnessed the violence of the Well of Eternity and the calm of the pool of evil energy, Savi still cheered. This energy is so stable. Yes, this was Duque's vomit, and the best part had been converted by Duque. But no matter how many impurities there were, it was still the purest dark energy in the twisted nether. The concentration of magic was not at the same level as the Well of Eternity. But unlike the high-purity magic well water in the Well of Eternity that could not be used directly, Duque's inferior dark energy could be easily absorbed by living beings. It was because he could see this at a glance, and with Duque using the Burning Legion's name to swindle people, that Pharaoh, who was of a high level like Savi's, did not doubt him at all. Duque was cold and arrogant, and his "I'm your boss" aura instantly dominated the scene. Purification is such a simple thing, and you want me, the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion, to do it? Not to mention these pollutants, even if Duque pooped a pile of sh*t, Savis would probably eat it. He had that pride. You little night elves want to ride on my coattails, right? Now that the coattails are here, kneel and lick them. You want power, right? I gave it to you, but what about your sincerity? Duque did not say a word, but his eyes and his aura said so. Duque's eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. Savis, know your place. If you don't satisfy me, don't blame me for starting a massacre. Savis shuddered. The carrot and the stick always arrived at the same time. Since the Grand Lord of the Burning Legion had fulfilled his promise, it was obviously time to pay the bill. Savis, this bastard who cheated his dream lover, his country, and his compatriots, decisively sold himself and his resources. Lord Mark Dooku. My direct subordinates and I are willing to offer our souls to the army. I will also bring Her Majesty Queen Azhara here to pay her respects to you within today. Savis's words were resolute and sonorous. selling souls and lives just like that. Grom, who was watching from the side, felt his teeth ache when he saw this heroic and righteous act. At this moment, Grom finally had the most direct and deep understanding of how crazy the ancient night elf mages were when it came to pursuing power. Xueqi did not even lift his eyelids. He snorted in disdain and pointed at the black sesame paste on the floor in front of him. Even in the eyes of the beastmen who did not like cleanliness, that place was filthy and smelly. Savi's, on the other hand, was like a dog chasing a bone. He crawled over respectfully and prostrated on the black mud and rainwater, his forehead touching the ground. "My lord, please grant me power." It was not just him. Even the radiant moon elven wizard who came with him knelt on the ground. Xueqi's lips parted slightly. Dark energy is powerful. Dark energy is also great. It is the noble power that the great commander, Sargeras, bestowed upon the chosen races that transcend the mortal world. Weak trash has no right to receive dark energy. As Xueqi's voice grew louder and louder, like thunder, an IMAX screen appeared behind Xueqi. It was a huge illusory screen that was 15 meters tall. "Look up. Look at the fate of those inferior races." The faces of the 3 elves who looked up were twitching. This was because in the image, over 20 creatures of different races had exploded and died. But the one who succeeded in the end showed an incomparably powerful increase in power. Xueqi was majestic and domineering. "Savis, let me ask you, are you willing to accept the baptism of dark energy under the flag of the Legion?" Chapter 10:10. Kiss. You want to drink my foot wash water. Oh no, you want to believe in religion? If you don't believe in religion and don't want to die, then it will be very difficult for me to deal with you. This was Xueqi's subtext. On the side, when he saw Duke using threats and promises to coax a powerful die-hard fan of the Burning Legion, the righteous hero Gromhel scream, he silently said in his heart, "Duke, you can do whatever you want, I can't bear to watch any longer. Call me if you're going to make a move." Raising his head slightly, Lord Howl looked at the gloomy and rainy sky. "Ah, the weather is so good today. I don't even have a place to count the ants." On the other side, Savis, who was immersed in the temptation of power, didn't notice the trap in Xueqi's words. "That's right. It's true that I let you join the Legion, but I didn't say whether the Legion was the Burning Legion or the Green Hat Pirates. Anyway, I am now the leader of the Burning Legion. If you are not convinced, you can go to President Savis and sue me. If you can see through my true identity and prove that this young master harbors ill intentions." As a result, of course, Savis believed in Xueqi's evil. It was like saying that classic sentence to the other half in a cathedral full of yin-yang fishes and blessings of Ami tofu. Savis said with sincerity and fanaticism, "I am willing." Grom, who was next to him, suddenly felt very lucky that he didn't drink too much water at lunch, otherwise he would have laughed out loud on the spot. He really didn't understand why Savis chose to believe in Xueqi's evil even though he knew that it was extremely risky and that he could easily lose his life. Grom wanted to ask more questions than the sky. In the words of a transmigrator, he wanted to ask Savis, "Are you stupid?" In fact, Grom couldn't be blamed. As a beastman, he could never understand the desire of the High Elves for power. At the same time, it was impossible for him to know how many modern scams Xueqi, a super transmigrator who had transmigrated twice, had seen in the Celestial Empire on Earth. This was actually a psychological bait. First of all, it was to grasp the psychological needs of the target. "You want power, right?" "I do." Then, he would repeatedly use psychological hints to hint to Savis, such as, "Your chances of winning the 20 million lottery are definitely higher than your chances of earning 20 million with your own hands." After becoming a breaking dawn and being unable to advance even an inch, Savis, who had been anxious for who knew how many centuries, was naturally more impatient and prone to losing his rationality. What followed next was the results of the series of digging holes. Publicly, Xueqi had the endorsement of Killed Jaden, the big boss of the Burning Legion. With his 4 identities as the Neighborhood Committee, the Jarmite Police Department, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Homeland Security Bureau, he had helped Xueqi prove that his grandfather was his grandfather. From the very beginning, he had beaten Sarvis into submission. Generally speaking, if any Burning Legion liege were to forcefully descend upon Azeroth, their combat power would be reduced by 80 to 90% by planet Azeroth's protection circle. However, Xueqi was an authentic Azeroth man. When Naz Dormu threw Xueqi back to 10,000 years ago, How could he not know about the back door he had left behind? So, Duke had brought back almost all the power he had obtained from the twisting nether. Duke, in his strongest shadow priest form that no one had ever seen in 10,000 years, had descended after being filled with dark energy. As soon as he descended, he beat up almost all the mortal powerhouses, completely shocking Savis and the other clowns. In the end, even if Sarvis was as cunning as a ghost, he had no choice but to jump into the fire pit. Duque did not even lift his eyelids as he said in a deep voice, "Offer your soul to the Legion." Duque drew a line with his finger, and an illusory soul scale appeared in front of Sarvis. It was a scale in the style of the Burning Legion. The base was an imitation of the old Kill Jaden's demonic hand, and then the two ends of the scale. One end was naturally left for Sarvis, and the other end was a glassware, which contained a ball of flickering yellow-green light of dark energy. Anyone could tell at a glance that this ball of dark energy was pure and powerful. It was hundreds of times better than the pool of mushy seeds in front of them. This was a special offering. Sarvis suddenly came to a realization. The more souls he offered, the more loyal it represented, and the more power he could obtain. It was very fair. There was nothing wrong with it. At first, he had only intended to offer 20% as a token of goodwill. But as things progressed, he felt that it would be embarrassing to offer less than 30%. Now it seemed that less than 40% was not appropriate at all. Of course, 50% was impossible. Anyone who cut off 50% of their soul would no longer be themselves, but just a walking corpse with a broken soul. So no matter how reluctant and bitter he was, Sarvis gritted his teeth and sent a thought to the empty end of the scale that he was willing to offer 40% of his soul. Sarvis. In order to prove my loyalty to the Burning Legion, I am willing to offer 40% of my soul to the Legion's emissary, Lord Infernal Emissary. After saying that, Sarvis seemed to have lost all his strength. Well said. With a smile on his face, Duque suddenly appeared out of thin air. With a demon's head as the blade, a soul dagger gleaming with dark energy suddenly appeared, and slowly cut down towards Sarvis. Ah! After Sarvis let out a scream, his body twitched, and a few seconds later, he slumped to the ground as if dead. When did Duque learn to cut souls? Please, this was a necessary self-cultivation for the Burning Legion's leader, okay? If he wanted to mingle in the Burning Legion, he had to learn how to capture other people's souls, and he still had the cheek to call himself a leader? Before Duque left, he had made a lot of promises to exchange for this essential leader skill from the Eridar Gemini. Of course, after the analysis of the system Genie, Duque had secretly cancelled the trick left behind by the Gemini. Cutting souls was a technical job. Forcibly taking out the other party's soul from the body was very difficult, and the prerequisite was that your soul's strength far surpassed the other party's. And it was strenuous and unrewarding, because forcibly cutting the other party's soul would also consume one's own soul power. But it was different if the other party offered it willingly. It was even easier than using a knife to cut butter. As long as this soul was in Duque's hands, in the future, as long as Duque squeezed it, Sarvis's soul would not collapse, and his soul would be destroyed, but his strength would be greatly reduced, and he would become useless. Since Sarvis had jumped into the pit, Duque naturally accepted it with a smile. Using the newly learned method, after solidifying Sarvis's soul, he sealed it in a special soul container and put it away. Duque smiled. On behalf of Lord Sajuras, I bestow upon you Sarvis's power. A green light of evil energy flicked out of his fingertip and flew to Sarvis's head, forming a green hat, crown, which was placed firmly on Sarvis's head. Chapter 10-11. Sarvis could clearly feel that the shackles that had bound him for countless years were beginning to be unlocked under the push of this brand new power. All over his body, the 100,000 pores were seeped into by this powerful and surging power. It brutally rushed into his body, entered his magic circuit, and with an unparalleled will, occupied every corner of his body. It was like a conqueror, branding every organ and every cell with dark powers. From the dimmest 6th grade star, it began to soar. 5th grade star. 4th grade star. 3rd grade star. The breaking dawn magic power that had not increased for many years had actually increased by 3 grades in one go. Sarvis could not help but tremble with excitement. Ha! Power. Is this the taste of power? Sarvis straightened up and looked at his slender fingers that seemed to have grown sharp claws, but he did not care. Instead, his face was full of ecstasy and excitement. However, all of a sudden, the power that seemed to be expanding endlessly in his body came to an abrupt stop. This made Savi suddenly fall from the clouds of happiness to the ground. He looked at Xueqi with a face full of surprise. He did not know what was going on. Although it was good, why was it different from what he had imagined? There was a strange and mysterious smile in Xueqi's smile. The army never raises trash. To measure the value of an existence, one is to look at his loyalty, and the other is to look at his actions. Go. Push for the opening of the portal to welcome the army into Azeroth. The day the portal opens will be the day you get the power you dream of. Savi suddenly came to a realization. That's right. Loyalty was important, but ability was also the key. Those who had loyalty but no ability were useless trash. Not to mention the army. Even he did not like those incompetent subordinates. There was nothing wrong with the scheming of an emperor. He still remembered that when he was communicating with the void, Savis in the spiritual world stood in front of a blazing sphere, looking at the crack in the middle with full attention. In the depths of the sphere, the eyes of God were also looking at him. I heard your pleas. And knowing your dream, the impurities and imperfections in the world should be eliminated. I will give you what you desire. You are my loyal servant. The entrance is not open yet. It needs to be strengthened, because it needs to be big enough for me to enter. Those were the exact words of God. Savis nodded to Xueqi, indicating that he understood the request of God, conveyed by Xueqi. The teleportation door made by the night elves using normal methods could not accommodate a god. As long as he squeezed in, the door would probably shatter into pieces. They had to enlarge and widen the door so that it could stay open forever. This was God's ultimate test for him. The great Lord Mark Dooku. My following request is not necessary. But if what? If there is more evidence, it will speed up the process of pushing Her Majesty Queen Azhara towards the army. After pondering for 2 seconds, Savis finally said, I hope the army can send some powerful servants to serve the Empress. If possible, try to look as beautiful as possible. Xueqi smiled. The great god will always satisfy the reasonable requests of his servants. In the afternoon, the forbidden palace of Azhara was silent. As the child of the stars, Kador usually slept during the day to avoid being hurt by the rough and hot sunlight. So the Empress was sleeping. As the Empress, Azhara had the right to rest as much as she wanted. In short, she had to be perfect in all aspects, especially when it came to her beauty. Therefore, Azhara did not have a good impression of the servant who came in quietly. The servant quickly knelt on both knees in the Empress room. The young Empress got off the bed and was faintly visible behind the thin curtains. Your Majesty, please forgive me, but the chief advisor wants to tell you something. He said he brought something that you are interested in. Azhara could not think of anything that could interest her and make her leave her comfortable bed immediately. Even if the one who made this request was her most trusted Savis. Her long silver hair was draped over the pillow. She pursed her lips but still waved. Let him wait for 5 minutes. The Empress looked angry, but she had already stood up gracefully. Looking at herself in the mirror, still charming, Azhara smiled. Perhaps her cute chief advisor thought he had already controlled his master. But as the most beautiful Empress, she had the absolute confidence that she could control any man. Let him come in 10 minutes. She stretched her body gracefully and reclined on a chaise longue, one arm behind her head. 2 servants in silk clothes knelt beside her and gently fanned themselves. Seeing Savis enter quickly, Azhara slightly adjusted her posture so that the contours of her most seductive body could match the light and be displayed in the most perfect way. The Empress would always speak in the most melodious and moving voice. My dear Savis, since you want to see me at this time, you must have something very important to tell me. The Empress' hand seemed intentional, but also seemed unintentional. It gently slid over her smooth thighs, making the curves of her body even more exquisite and curvaceous. Please forgive me for taking some time so that I can adjust to my best state to see you. Looking at Savis, whose throat made a swallowing motion, the Empress' smile became even more charming. Savi's heart tightened. He went forward and knelt on one knee. Staring at the white marble floor, he replied, Source of all light, the most beautiful existence in the world, thank you for giving me this opportunity to see you. I am very bold to disturb you, but I have brought you a very interesting gift. This gift is truly worthy of you, the Queen of the Night Elves, the ruler of the world. Can I summon them up? He glanced at her and found that these words had definitely attracted the Empress' attention. The Empress' eyes showed increasing curiosity and desire through the veil. Azhara was no longer in a lazy posture. Instead, she sat up and leaned against the back of the chaise longue. Her limbs were slightly tense because of nervousness. You have whetted my appetite, my dear Savis. I permit you to present the gift. The counselor stood up, turned around, and snapped his fingers toward the door. There was never a lack of guards when it came to presenting gifts. Surrounded by guards, Queen Azhara's breathing suddenly quickened, and then her face flushed with excitement. There were 4 incomparably tall demon guards and 12 elf maids wearing only underwear and cicada-thin gauze draped over their shoulders. If the wildness of the demon guards could satisfy the Empress' sense of security. However, the powerful magical waves emanating from the maids with mysterious glowing patterns on their bodies deeply attracted the Queen's attention. Chapter 10-12. On this day, almost all the nobles of the Night Elves learned of a piece of news. Queen Azhara left her chambers in the middle of the night to secretly visit a special person near Galhala. Although it was said to be a secret, in reality, hundreds of moon guards who practiced both magic and martial arts passed through the streets and alleys. There was no April Fool's Day for the Night Elves. Almost all the important Night Elves doubted their ears. Queen Azhara left her residence. In order to maintain her top-notch appearance, she almost never went out. No, she rarely even left her own palace, not to mention Azhara City. Now that the Queen had left the city, this night was destined to be different. This news was so explosive that even the news of magical green humanoid monsters appearing near Sir Lama was easily overshadowed. A rainy night. The Night Elves loved to go out at night, but the wet weather made Queen Azhara a little unhappy. But the little unhappiness in her heart was all driven away by the huge blue-skinned existences surrounding her carriage. Ah! They are so strong. The Queen's eyes were strangely blurred. Like a lighthouse in the night, the luxurious golden carriage could attract the attention of others from afar. 12 terrifying blue-skinned warriors were like a moving wall, lined up beside the Queen's carriage. Because they were too tall, they could only lower their bodies and bend their waists to pass through the roads that could be easily passed by carriages. This was to prevent the horns on their heads from damaging the beautiful arcades or archways that were characteristic of the Night Elves. They understood human nature so well, and were so obedient. Looking at their huge shields and extremely violent and beautiful maces and axes, Queen Azhara was completely entranced. She still remembered half a day ago, when she asked Savis, "What are they?" Savis's answer: "They are your most loyal guards, my Empress. Protecting your life is their responsibility, and the only reason for their existence." Although 12 Heaven Realm warriors was a little, Savis promised that there would be more and more Heaven Realm warriors sent by God in the future. But these 12 were the first batch, and they were all sent for the Queen. Azhara, who was deep in thought, stretched her hand out of the carriage window. Like a child who had just touched a new toy, her fingers lightly touched the bronze armor of a demon guard, making a hissing sound. The demon guard glanced at the Queen and turned his head back expressionlessly. These powerful otherworld guards were very important, but Queen Azhara felt that the 12 maids were the key. She knew very well what the criteria for choosing a maid was. Night Elves were born good at martial arts, swordsmanship, or archery, but there were still too few who were born with magic circuits. Those who were talented in magic had long been selected to become wizards. Elites who cultivated both magic and martial arts would be absorbed into the Moon Guards, which directly belonged to the Queen. These 12 maids were obviously the kind that didn't have much talent. However, through the divine might of the Lord that Savis mentioned, he could actually directly engrave magic circuits on the maidservants' bodies, allowing the maidservants to have magic circuits from nothing and become low-level magicians. Her most loyal captain of the Moon Guards had told her that the 12 maids were all earth mages. This was truly an epic-making revolution. Everyone knew that the High Elves were crazy about magic. However, the worst part was that only a small group of elves could master magic. Even the union of 2 pure-blooded High Elf magicians had a chance of giving birth to a child that didn't know magic. This was something that Queen Azhara, who was crazy about using magic to rule the world, could not tolerate. It was obvious that this emissary sent by the god in her heart had presented her with a brand new technology that had broken the seemingly absolute barrier between mortals and mystics. This was the biggest reason why Queen Azhara did not hesitate to condescend to personally visit. "As long as I have this, I can suppress those old fogies in Sir Lama in one go. The queen then retracted her gaze, and a strange yet happy expression appeared on her perfect face. It seems that I have to make up my mind. At the same time, in the royal villa where the dirty moonwell was located, there was not a single night elf within a 100-meter radius. Xueqi was like a child playing with graffiti, doodling the dark energy that was so precious to the high elves. Seeing Xueqi messing around with the dark energy that had once tortured the orcs to the brink of madness, Grom sighed. Xueqi suddenly spoke in orc language. Do you know the history of Azeroth? Grom shook his head. I've never had the time. When the orcs came to Azeroth, they were initially conquerors, and when they failed, they became survivors. As if he had thought of something, Grom added, according to my rough understanding, the Burning Legion was defeated in this ancient war, right? That's right. It was supposed to be like that, but it seems that someone wanted to change the ending. That's why Nozdormu sent us here. Our mission is to ensure that this part of history does not change, right? Grom bared his teeth. Xueqi did not answer directly, and instead said, if nothing unexpected happened, would you be willing to run back to 10,000 years in the future? Be willing? The answer was obviously no. If Grom was still that arrogant orc, and his mind was filled with the idea of orcs beating all other races, then it would not have mattered. But after witnessing the Burning Legion's massive fleet in the Twisted Nether, and witnessing the massive demonic army that devoured and destroyed countless planets, Grom could not help but have a thought that would make a hero like him shudder. If he did not do something, even if the demons that descended on the world of Azeroth were only left with 1/100th of their power, the Burning Legion could just use their lives to fill the gap, and all life on Azeroth would die. Grom's tone was as firm as nails as he enunciated each word. I know, will, heart. Then let us play it big. A mysterious smile appeared on Xueqi's face. All right. Not long after, the sound of quick and light footsteps surrounded the entire royal villa. The strong and magical moon wardens quickly occupied all the important positions in the mansion. After knocking lightly on the door and getting Xueqi's permission to enter, Savis entered and nodded at Xueqi and Grom. Savis straightened his clothes and chanted, Light of the eternal night, the most beautiful and powerful existence in the world, Her Majesty Azhara of the Kaldorii Empire, has arrived. Chapter 10:13. Any ruler would like to put gold on their faces. That was acting cool. He was nervous when Savis announced. If Xueqi, God's emissary, was displeased, he would be in trouble. Luckily, Xueqi did not react. Queen Azhara entered the room with her guards and maids surrounding her. She walked like the wind and was full of confidence. She did not make any sound, and was even quieter than a cat's footsteps. The moment she entered, she noticed that Xueqi definitely lacked respect for her. If it was another existence, she might not be happy, but this subtle cold attitude just happened to prove that Xueqi came from the side of God. If he was God's emissary that surpassed all power in the mortal world, there would be no direct conflict with her imperial power. Queen Azhara understood her position very well. She gently lifted the hem of her gorgeous dress and bowed elegantly to Xueqi. May I ask if you are God's emissary, Lord Mark Dooku? This sweet voice made countless high elves fall head over heels. Indeed, the scene when she walked in with a smile was so perfect that it was breathtaking. Even Savi's eyes widened. She was the glory of the night elves. Every time she breathed, everyone held their breath and listened to her orders. From the expressions on the moon guards' faces, if they could please her, they would even be willing to go out and fight against dragons, or even opponents stronger than dragons. Even though they knew they would die, they did not hesitate. Grom's eyes widened. As a beastman, he had a different sense of beauty compared to humans and elves. But he was still afraid. Who was Xueqi? A perverted fellow who had taken care of the 3 Windrunner sisters, including Queen Servanas of Sin, Dorii. Others might not know Xueqi's character, but Grom definitely knew. After all, he had fought with the 3 Windrunner sisters on the battlefield. Xueqi was an elf lover. Even though the beastman's understanding was slightly different, it was more or less the same. At this moment, Grom was really afraid that Xueqi would not be able to control himself and ruin his grand plan. However, Xueqi didn't react at all. That's right, Queen Azhara was indeed a great beauty. Her skin was as smooth as silk, and her long silver hair was scattered on her shoulders. The ends of her hair were slightly curled. The clothes she wore matched the color of her eyes, which was a graceful and luxurious silver color. But what kind of normal human would be attracted to a dark purple-skinned female night elf? Moreover, the Empress was considered very tall among female night elves, even taller than many male night elves. Only Savi's was better than her. Duque took a look and really wanted to shout, "Oh my God! I'm not Yao Ming, I can't handle this height." Most people looked at models with appreciation, but not every man had the height to match a model. Duque was by no means short among humans. Unfortunately, he was nothing in front of Queen Azhara, who was 10 meters tall. If someone asked Duque why he didn't like Queen Azhara, then Duque would definitely reply, "Sorry. I don't like the feeling of climbing trees." Well, since Duque was immune to Queen Azhara's most powerful legendary weapon, beauty, then the next step was business. Facing Queen Azhara's question, the super cool best actor Duque slowly stood up from the chair, and a terrifying dark aura bloomed from his body. Then he slowly raised his right hand. Queen Azhara gently waved her hand to stop the nervous moon guards. At such a close distance, she could clearly feel the powerful, surging, ocean-like magic power on Duque's body. However, she was good at manipulating people's hearts, so she didn't feel any killing intent from Duque, nor did she feel any signs that he was going to harm her. Then, Azhara saw a ring on Duque's right little finger that emitted a terrifying aura of destruction. On the ring was the head of a two-horned demon that seemed to be burning with flames. The exquisite craftsmanship made the head look like it was alive. What she saw was not a small head on a ring, but a giant that was so huge that it could support the heavens and the earth, a flame giant that was bathed in flames. "High Elf Azhara, kiss this ring with the head of my lord Sargeras. Show me your sincerity." Duke's voice was majestic, but it also had a kind of ethereal feeling. It was like the sound of a morning bell from a tall building in the distance, and it had a kind of penetrating power that could shock people's hearts. Not to mention the moon guards. Even Savis and Azhara firmly believed that this ring that emitted a huge wave of evil power was a holy item that the Lord of the Burning Legion had bestowed upon Duque. Only Grom was dumbfounded. Anyone would think that Duque was Sargera's most trusted High Lord, envoy, and favorite subject. Only Grom knew that Duque had never seen Sargeras before. Not only that, but this high-class magic ring was something that Duke had casually carved early in the morning. That bastard Duque still had the nerve to ask Grom for a few sweet potatoes from the maidservants to practice. Grom had thought that Duque's clumsy carving wouldn't be able to fool even the orcs. Who knew that Duque's improvement was actually at the speed of light? He'd found a gemstone of unknown material and completed it in less than 10 minutes before the queen arrived. He'd carved Sargeras' statue and infused it with high-purity evil power. Everyone else believed that Duque was loyal to the Burning Legion, but Grom was the first to not believe it. Well, it seemed that the High Elves had been fooled. Grom suddenly thought that he understood how Duke had managed to unite the scattered kingdoms of the High Elves as he looked at the dumbfounded High Elves. Logically speaking, Duque was so arrogant that he didn't even call Azhara by her title. Instead, he called her High Elf Azhara. That was very rude. But the High Elves, who were crazy about power, liked it this way. As expected, the envoy sent by God was a fortress. Even a pile of God's *T smelled good. After Duque had pulled in the demon guards and displayed the era-transcending technique of carving evil power circuits in the human body, as well as the powerful magic waves, they were dead set on believing that Duque would bring them what they'd always been seeking. Power that transcended the mortal world. With Queen Azhara at the front and Sarvis right behind her, more than 100 high elves in the hall knelt on one knee and chanted the name of Sargeras' God. Chapter 10:14. That's right. Azhara was taller than Duque. After kneeling and lowering her noble head, she was just a lowly existence compared to Duque. A pair of soft hands carefully held Duque's hand as if he was holding a holy relic. Queen Azhara slowly moved her beautiful face closer to Duque's fingers, and slightly opened her purple lips that looked like they were painted with lip gloss. The lips that countless high elves dreamed of gently kissed the ring on Duque's finger. A lingering moan could easily make a man think of some adult toys. Her eyes were blurry, her face was flushed, and that terrible ending sound made almost all the night elves look up secretly, but only Azhara was enjoying herself. Oh, this power! This sweetness! High purity and low concentration of dark power flowed down her lips and down her throat. The warm feeling quickly spread from her stomach to every inch of her blood vessels, and into every cell. Azhara could clearly feel her body rejoicing, excited and ecstatic at the injection of this new power. Queen Azhara finally confirmed that this was indeed the power of a god, the most perfect power given to the high elves by the heavens. Even though she longed for more dark power, Queen Azhara was a very sensible woman. She took a step back and knelt in front of Xueqi. I, Azhara, feel the power of a god. My lord's messenger, great Lord Dooku. Please read the will of God. The queen knelt in front of him, her beautiful silver hair draped over her bare shoulders. Her gorgeous dress spread out on the ground made Azhara look like a blooming violet. If it wasn't for the fact that the queen did not conform to human aesthetics, perhaps this would be a very erotic scene. Since it had nothing to do with hobbies, then of course it was official business. Xueqi calmly retracted his hand and said in a clear voice, "The will of Lord Sajaras is for you to offer up the Well of Eternity as a reward for your promotion. You will be granted great dark energy and true immortality. As for the first step, I hope that you can quickly build a giant teleportation gate that is big enough for my lord and the Burning Legion to pass through. Do you have any objections?" Azhara frowned and said with some difficulty, "The High Elves have no objections, but there are many Night Elves who reject arcane magic. They believed in the Moon Goddess, Elune, and the way of nature. I think they will firmly reject the Lord's arrival." Xueqi sneered. "Then, why can't we find a way to prevent the outside world from interfering with our plan to build the portal? This will make things much easier for you in the future." Savis, who was kneeling at the side, raised his head and opened his mouth as if he wanted to explain. The natural division within the Night Elves was very difficult to unify. But when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he realized that there was nothing he could say. If it could be done easily, they would have done it long ago. Azhara was a little confused about Xueqi's words at first, until Xueqi added another sentence. "I mean to forever avoid interference from within." This time, both Azhara and Savis understood. Their faces turned pale in an instant. Xueqi was hinting that if negotiations and political means could not solve the problem, then they should prepare for war. "Azhara, you are a queen." Xueqi commented on Azhara as if she was a passerby who had nothing to do with him. His deep black eyes gazed into her golden eyes, and his gaze gradually became stern. But if a queen can't even control her own subjects, then it means that she is not worthy of the crown on her head. I think you understand what I mean. Of course, my lord hopes that there was only one Azhara in the past, and in the future. Xueqi's words were quite artistic and very sharp. The queen and Savis left in a daze. They saw hope and a way to obtain new power, but they were also forced into a dead end. Either they raised their butcher's knife against those nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or they offended the extremely powerful god that they worshipped very much. He could either raise his butcher's knife against the nature elves who were unwilling to submit, or offend the god that he worshipped and possessed immeasurable power. Worst of all, Duke had only given them 3 days to think it over. Almost as soon as the night elves left, Grom looked at Xueqi with a toothache. Almost as soon as the night elves left, Grom looked at Duke with a toothache. "Why are you looking at me?" Grom asked. "Did you forget that I told you about the original direction of this history?" That's right. Xueqi had indeed confessed this part of history to Grom. Lord Roar also knew that it was Queen Azhara who had sided with Sargeras that led to the famous ancient war in the world of Azeroth. Even though he knew this was the case, Lord Roar still felt his balls ache. At the thought of Xueqi seriously luring others to kill their own kind, and possibly succeeding, Grom felt a pang in his heart. If Xueqi used similar methods against the tribe in the future, would the tribe be able to withstand Xueqi's schemes? No matter how he looked at it, after being cursed by Arkheron and undergoing the dark power baptism, Xueqi seemed to have a lot more evil tricks up his sleeves. Grom struggled for a while, but still asked. If he did not ask, he was afraid that he would go crazy. Aren't you afraid that Queen Azhara will suddenly attack and really destroy the Night Elves that originally belonged to the victor's side? Or are you going to secretly inform the Night Elves when the Queen makes her move? Xueqi wagged his right index finger proudly, and then handed Grom a list written in Khador. This is a list of the Moon Guardians provided by Savis. According to Savis, these are the strongest who are absolutely loyal to the Queen in both magic and martial arts. If I am willing to use dark power to strengthen them, please choose from these elves first. Grom gritted his teeth for a long time. I don't know Elven language. No. I just want to tell you that I saw a very interesting name in this list. Xueqi pointed at a name. This name is Illidan Stormrage. Illidan. Grom did not react to the name at first. After all, he was not a true transmigrator. After all, they had just fought the Battle of Mount Hyjal. Even if Grom did not want to care about the Night Elves, he at least remembered who had fought alongside him on the Night Elves' side. Grom's heart suddenly tightened. He suddenly understood. Xueqi's smile was incomparably pure. Yes, pure as a fox. Illidan's brother is called Malfurion. At this point in time, the woman they are madly pursuing is Tyrant Whisperwind. Chapter 10-15. Grom definitely wouldn't recognize the Night Elves, but Tyrant had just worked with him. How could she not recognize him? Grom was speechless. Xueqi, that bastard. He even calculated this. If Queen Azhara wanted to attack the Nature faction, she wouldn't be able to bypass her most trusted and strongest subordinates, the Moon Guards. Unfortunately, the Moon Guards had the biggest traitor of the Nature faction, and one who had direct access to the higher-ups. It would be strange if the Queen faction could succeed. Grom really didn't want to ask where Tyrant and the Stormrage brothers were now. They shouldn't be low anyway. Grom's guess was right. Tyrant was already the leader of the Elune sisters at this point in time, and Malfurion had been studying under the demigod Cenarius for a long time. Once the two of them were alarmed, it would be like pulling out a radish with mud. Grom didn't give up. Is it good to cause chaos among the Night Elves now? Xueqi asked in return. Do you think the Night Elves will suffer heavy casualties from the ambush of their own kind, or from the ambush of the Burning Legion? Besides, Killed Jaden will definitely send other strong people to open the portal apart from me. Since we have to ensure that the core of this history isn't changed, why don't we control the pace of things? Xueqi's words made sense. Lord Howl was speechless. In the past, Lord Howl only felt that Xueqi was scary, but he didn't know how scary. Only after working with Xueqi personally did he know that Xueqi's intellect surpassed all beast men. He was thrown into the huge pit that was the Burning Legion, but Xueqi still hid his identity and became a great lord, using the Burning Legion's name to swindle others. What was even more ridiculous was that after swindling the first one, he still came to eat the next one. Be it the Burning Legion or the Kaldorii Empire, they were both existences that could easily crush him. But at this pace, both of them were being toyed with by Duke. If not for the fact that Xueqi had always been a righteous hero of the Alliance and was willing to suffer a curse from Archimonde for Azeroth, Grom would have suspected that Xueqi was a natural schemer. In the meantime, while Xueqi was actively deceiving his superiors and bullying his subordinates, secretly stealing Kador's authority and seeping it into his personal goods, Azeroth's history was progressing as the original. Probably. Tyrant Whisperwind ended her evening prayers in the Moon Maiden Temple in Surima. Coming out of the prayer room, she slowly sat down on a chair and slightly stretched her body that was a little stiff from kneeling for a long time. There was one thing that had been bothering her for a long time. The relationship between Malfurion, Illidan, and her had changed over the years. They were no longer childhood playmates. The simplicity and happiness of childhood were no longer there. Instead, they were replaced by the complicated relationships of the adult world. Her feelings towards Malfurion and Illidan had also changed. She knew that their feelings for her must have changed. The competition between the two brothers had always been carried out in a friendly atmosphere, but as time went on, the competition became more and more obvious. She didn't like it. Now, it had almost evolved into a fight between them, as if it was for the sake of competition. Tyrant knew that the target of their competition was her. She was flattered. Deep in her heart, she felt that when it came to finding a life partner, one of them should be either Illidan or Malfurion. She didn't want anyone to be hurt. But she knew that if she chose one, it would mean hurting the other. If she chose neither, it would be the worst possible outcome. Both would be hurt. Tyrant forcefully pushed the worries out of her mind and prepared to leave. She wore a silver-hooded robe and did not say a word as she hurried through the grand marble hall of the temple. Even when the other priests greeted her, she only smiled in return. She looked up at the roofless roof of the temple. Most of the prayer rooms were open air, and the moonlight shone down gently, like a mother caressing her favorite child. Tyrant passed by the faintly discernible carvings of the goddess, and finally crossed the marble floor of the porch and walked out of the temple. Outside, the cool night air made her feel more comfortable. Tyrant walked down the smooth white steps and joined the crowd. Many bowed their heads to welcome her. Others respectfully made way for her. That's right, to the people of Sir Lama, the priests of the Moon Goddess Temple were the incarnations of the goddess. Even Tyrant herself was unconsciously deified by the people around her. Tyrant sighed softly and smiled at the people. But at this moment, Tyrant just wanted to return to a peaceful and simple life. Riding on the night saber, Tyrant's hair fluttered in the night wind. Tidying up her slightly messy hair, Tyrant allowed the night saber to lead her home while she fell into deep thought. It was the latest news. Her Majesty, who almost never left Azhara City, suddenly went to a royal villa in Garhala. It was rumored that the Empress did not hesitate to visit a mysterious guest for a brand new arcane energy. This was not a good sign. The highborn elves abusing the magic of the Well of Eternity could very well bring disaster. The topic of the Well of Eternity had always been a widely discussed topic in the Alun sisterhood. The Queen's actions caused Tyrant and the other moon god priests to worry. At this moment, a loud commotion attracted Tyrant's attention. She noticed that there was a huge cage at the side of the central square of Sir Lama. A large group of night elves were pointing at the cage. What she saw was a huge, burly green-skinned humanoid monster. From afar, it looked a little like a troll, but upon closer inspection, this obviously male monster was at least twice as burly as a troll. His bulging muscles were showing off his explosive strength. Illidan was there as well. He and a few moon guardians were pointing at the monster. "What's going on?" Tyrant asked Illidan. "I don't know." Our patrolling soldiers suddenly found this monster unconscious on the ground. When Tyrant tried to approach the green-skinned monster, Illidan grabbed her and said, "Be careful." The moment this guy woke up, he almost killed a moon guard. That sword in his hand can easily cut through our armor. Tyrant noticed that one of the moon guardians next to Illidan was holding an extraordinary two-handed greatsword. It was a weapon that was completely different from the night elf style. Just as she focused on the greatsword, a voice came from the mouth of the violent green-skinned monster. "Your Excellency Tyrant Whisperwind." Chapter 10:16. Tyrant jumped in fright, but she was certain that the green-skinned creature had said her name in the terrible Kadoriai language. "You can speak Kador?" Not only Tyrant, but even Illidan was shocked. He swore that before the green-skinned monster was escorted to Sir Lama, none of the elves had mentioned Tyrant's name in front of the green-skinned monster, let alone her full name. The green-skinned creature bared its fangs and mumbled some Kador syllables. It did not have the elegant and artistic tone of the elves, but it was still Kador. Kador, I'm not good at it." The corner of Tyrant's eye twitched slightly and she turned her head. "Illidan, let him go." But he once. Illidan was obviously in a difficult position. "If you were in my shoes, what would you do if you woke up in a strange place and found an unknown being threatening your life with a weapon?" Tyrant countered. Illidan was speechless and could only do as he was told. However, when he opened the door of the cage, he secretly held onto an elven dagger with his left hand. He had absolute confidence in his skills. Even if he could not stop this strange green creature with his instantaneous magic, he was agile enough to send the dagger into the creature's throat. Tyrant had a gentle smile on her face. She walked over and crouched down, chanting Alun's name. The goddess of the moon answered her prayer almost immediately, and a gentle white light descended from the sky. "Praise Alun." The surrounding elves knelt in response to the miracle. The huge wound on the green giant's left arm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Illidan sighed. Tyrant was too kind. For a monster of unknown race, she used a limited number of divine grace spells per day. However, this was also why he was so infatuated with Tyrant. Tyrant's lips moved slightly. "I apologize for the rudeness of my people. Please forgive their overreaction. After all, they suddenly found an outsider in our territory." "Yes. May I ask, what is your name?" "Apologize. My name is Blo. Gax. Not Kador. Enemy." That's right, this green-skinned fellow who was miserably captured and almost sent to the animal park to increase the ticket revenue was the orc hero Brock, who was sent here by Nozdormu to maintain history and cause trouble 10,000 years ago. Brock, who didn't expect to be separated, was dumbfounded. Fortunately, it was different from the original history that Xueqi knew. In the original history, Brock was thrown there without realizing it. This time, It was Nosdormu who had informed them beforehand. Thrall then hurriedly asked Duque to get a high elven mage to give Brock and Grum a language crash course. Sharpening a spear at the last moment, even if it's not bright, it's still bright. It had to be said that orcs really didn't have any talent for languages. Other than Orgrim and Thrall, most of the beastmen were rough and boorish. No wonder the orcs were born with -2 intelligence in most Dungeons & Dragons games. Tyrande and Illidan took good care of Brock and moved him to a night elf inn. Even though the two sides had great communication difficulties, after a difficult night of detailed discussion, Tyrande finally understood one thing. There were 5 emissaries who came with Brock to the Khador Empire. Their goal was to stop a calamity that was about to affect the entire Khador Empire, and even the entire planet Azeroth. Burning Legion? The literal translation of the name made Tyrande's heart palpitate. Thinking of Queen Azhara's abnormal actions, Tyrande suddenly had an ominous feeling that a storm was about to arrive. She felt that she seemed to have seen through the fog of fate and vaguely grasped the direction of events. Illidan, go back to the Moon Guards first. If there's nothing important, don't contact me and Malfurion. Remember to keep your distance. Understood. Illidan suddenly felt a sense of eagerness. Tyrande rarely needed his help. It felt good to be trusted by Tyrande at a time when something big was likely to happen. Unfortunately, Tyrande's next words made Illidan a little unhappy. The moon has already started to set. I can't contact Goddess Elune for now. I'll go and discuss this with Malfurion. Illidan had a bitter taste in his mouth. As expected, compared to me, you trust my brother more? This was an indescribable envy. Even jealousy. But Illidan did not say anything. He turned around and left. He had already made up his mind to keep a close eye on the Queen. He wanted to dig out the secrets that the Queen's faction had purposely hidden to prove to Tyrande that he was the heroic companion she wanted. The sky was just beginning to brighten when Tyrande received another unexpected piece of news. Malfurion personally came to find her, and the first thing he said was, 3 strange beings came to our forest, and Cenarius took them in. 2 of them claim to be humans, and one of them speaks a strange elvish language that seems to be derived from Khador, but the words are obviously different. That's not important. They brought a message. Soon, a terrifying demon army called the Burning Legion will descend upon Kaldorii. Tyrande was shocked, and her chest heaved up and down. This was the second time she had heard this name that night. She really wanted to treat this term as nonsense and expel it from her mind, but she couldn't do it. Let's go and meet those outsiders first, and then we need to reach an agreement with Cenarius and the others. One of the main reasons why Sir Lama could maintain a different political view from the Queen was that the natural faction had the support of Goddess Elune and a large number of demigods. Excluding Goddess Elune, who had not descended to the earth as an avatar. Including Cenarius, the Boar Agamagan, the Bear Brothers User and Usoc, the White Stag Malorn, the Storm Raven Averna, and the other immortals formed the ancient Guardian formation, which was like a mountain blocking Queen Azhara's path. Just as Tyrande was startled and reacted. In Galhalla, Duque, who was allowed to have almost unlimited power, was performing a summoning ritual on the main vein of the Well of Eternity. Although Kaldorii, who claimed to be a high elf, was considered the ancestor of magic under the Blue Dragon, Duke realized that the way Savis and the others used magic was so crude that it made people's hair stand on end. Chapter 10:17. Come to think of it, if there was an inexhaustible source of mana, then the priority would definitely be to create something grand and not to pursue efficiency. It was like a rich man with a net worth of tens of thousands of dollars for a meal. As a result, the habitual rough use of mana made many finer spells lose the opportunity to be developed. It was different in the future. The second Well of Eternity was made by Illidan after he stole a few bottles of pure Well of Eternity water and diluted it. The High Elf Sunwell was made by Dethrima after he stole Illidan's collection. It was an inferior third-generation product. Although the High Elves had always bragged about how awesome their Sunwell was, it might be true for humans without a mana source. But compared to the most primitive version of the Well of Eternity, it was as ridiculous as some Chinese daring to claim to have filled the entire Poyang Lake with a 330 milliliter bottle of mineral water. Since there was no way to provide an unlimited supply of mana, he could only work on techniques to make up for the lack of quantity. Didn't you see that the amazing Phoenix Flame magic circuit that should have been popularized had become the exclusive supply of the Sunstrider royal family? It was because the requirements for mana were too high that it couldn't be popularized. Because the High Elves had an inexhaustible power of the Well of Eternity, they neglected the various basics and the creation and optimization of magic circuits. As a result, once the mana that an individual could carry reached the upper limit, the strength of a mage would immediately peak. In turn, they would lose the various magic skills that should have been obtained through training. When Xueqi displayed extraordinary magic skills in front of Savi's, what he received was, of course, a full house of applause. Xueqi drew a three-dimensional magic array with 7 floors. From bottom to top, there was a magic array on each floor. If one looked down from the sky and saw through it, they would find that it was 7 huge concentric circles. From a three-dimensional perspective, it looked like an inverted cone. When Xueqi finished drawing, the CAD or Arcanists were already kneeling on the ground. Xueqi used the incomparably cool crystal pulse staff as a magic pen. After he finished drawing the array, he elegantly let the staff return to his portal bag. Okay. Activate the magic array. You can attract more messengers of the gods. Xueqi's look of "don't ask me to do such a heavy job" made him look pretentious. Only Grom at the side knew that Duke was now king priest. He really couldn't do the job of summoning. At this moment, in the distorted void, Kill Jaden's long right index finger was drawing circles on a huge moonstone with his sharp nails. Her nails, which were strong enough to break gold and jade, easily dug out a handful of green powder from the moonstone. The Eridar twins did not even dare to breathe loudly. They were familiar with Kill Jaden's style, which meant that Kill Jaden was getting impatient. He was a very generous master. At the same time, he was also an extremely harsh master. Benefits can be given, and the amount can be negotiated. The premise is that you have to satisfy his seemingly bottomless and crazy demands. The Gemini knew very well that it was not Kill Jaden's original plan to send a human lord into Azeroth. However, after a simple test, they found that the guy called Infernal seemed to be more suitable to break through planet Azeroth's defense array. That was why they sent him first. Now, 2 days had passed, and there was no reply at all. According to the previous agreement, they had to return to the distorted void as soon as they successfully logged in. Kill Jaden suddenly said, 3 days. I'll wait until the 3rd day at most. If there's no reply, then you two will go. In the Burning Legion, most of the demons preferred to be rough and violent. When it came to sneaking in, this was the Eridar twins' specialty. But for the Gemini to go, it meant that Kill Jaden had chosen the wrong person, which was a slap to his face. This would obviously cause Archimonde to start showing off again. At this moment, Elisa's suddenly sensed something. Master. There's a response. It's Infernal. He directly opened a high-level teleportation door with high stability. It can allow a mid-tier demon lord to enter Azeroth without any damage. Elisa's voice was slightly excited. Ha! A rare smile appeared on Kill Jaden's face. There was a huge difference in difficulty between letting a demon lord of the same rank who was completely resisted by the planet's defense system descend, and letting a mid-tier demon lord who had adapted to the world of Azeroth arrive without any damage. If it was stable, the difficulty would be 10 times higher. Kill Jaden originally sent Xueqi to take the lead and only asked him to find a way to contact the army believers in Azeroth to see if he could build a relatively stable small teleportation door and teleport as many elite demon guards as possible over. He wanted to build a forward base in Azeroth, and then consider expanding the teleportation door. Now that Xueqi had directly completed the task, the Eridar twins who were responsible for recommending Xueqi were also proud. Elisa stepped forward. It seems that our new lord is very capable. I didn't realize that Infernal's spatial magic level was so high. This has completely surpassed the standard of mortals in Azeroth. Queen Saloras smiled. He has already used his actions to prove his loyalty to the army. Master, do you think? On the surface, the twins were asking for a reward for Xueqi, but in reality, weren't they asking for credit for themselves? Kill Jaden also smiled. I hate trash the most, but I'm never stingy with rewards for my capable subordinates. He waved his huge demon hand and 3 boxes that emitted a mysterious purple glow appeared in front of the twins. Give the last one to Infernal. The twins giggled and accepted it. Elisa's asked, Master, who should we send as a mid-tier lord? Kill Jaden smiled evilly. Didn't Archimonde always say that the second wave must be his subordinates? Then let Magtheridon go. In all fairness, Magtheridon was also a very powerful demon. If not for the fact that Xueqi had just dealt with Manaroth, the boss of the Abyss Lords, Magtheridon would definitely cause trouble for Xueqi. However, with that incident, it was clear who was the leader and who was the second. They were both intermediate lords. In the end, in the Mage Tower of Galhalla, the High Elves who kept chanting and pouring huge amounts of magic finally waited for the other oracle of their dreams. It was a giant demon with a lower body like a dragon and an upper body like a human. It was more than 30 meters long and 12 meters tall and wielded a double-headed heavy sword. Chapter 10:18. When this huge demon squeezed through the portal like toothpaste, Savis and the others were worried that the portal would not be able to withstand it and explode. In the end, the magic formation that Xueqi had drawn stood the test and allowed this huge demon to successfully descend. Unexpectedly, this huge demon that could make any Kadorii tremble knelt in front of the tiny Xueqi. I obey Lord Acheron's orders. Before the main force of the Burning Legion arrives, I, Magtheridon, will obey all your orders. In terms of size, he looked like a dragon swearing allegiance to a newborn deer instead of eating it. It was laughable, but no one dared to laugh. Xueqi's body glowed like a dark sun, constantly reminding the people around him of his terror and power. Xueqi's high status left the Kadorii speechless. Xueqi rubbed his eyebrows and said without holding back, "Damn it! I want a warlock, an Eridar warlock who can help stabilize and open a larger portal. Why did Acheron send me an idiot who only knows how to charge and break through enemy lines?" Magtheridon subconsciously wanted to flip out on the spot. But at that moment, the Xueqi in front of him suddenly changed. It was not a change in Xueqi's power, but in his aura. It was as if time had turned back and he had returned to his childhood, when he was watched by a group of fierce elders. It was a feeling of helplessness and terror. This terror was even greater than most of the Burning Legion's high-ranking lords. Magtheridon's dark green face immediately turned the color of pig liver. Anyone could see that he was sullen, but he did not dare to show it. Come to think of it, Xueqi had defeated his boss, Manaroth, in one move. If he really wanted to deal with him, half a move was enough. Feeling the surging dark power on Xueqi's body, Magtheridon, who had been slapped in the face on the spot, would do as he was told even if he had to break his long, horn-like tusks and swallow them himself. He once again lowered his huge demon head. Apologies, Great Lord of the Spiders. It is Lord Acheron's will that assigned me here. If you have any opinions, you can report them to the Lord. I am only responsible for obeying your orders. The first half of the sentence pointed out that there was still a boss behind me, but the second half was obviously a sign of fear. Such a colossus that exuded a terrifying aura was acting like a little wife who had suffered domestic abuse, admitting her grandson in front of Xueqi. This scene was as strange as it could be. Savi secretly sucked in a breath of cold air, his reverence for Xueqi involuntarily increasing. Of course, Magtheridon was the main culprit in this large-scale teleportation, but the total number of teleportations wasn't just enough to teleport an intermediate lord. Since the defense circle of planet Azeroth had not been completely cracked, no one knew when the next teleportation would be. Therefore, it was necessary to send as many troops as possible. If the maximum number of teleportation this time was 100, then Magtheridon would have more than 80 points. The remaining points would still be enough to send a lot of elite demons. Groups of demon guards and apocalypse guards stepped out from the wide-open teleportation gate. Apart from them, there were also many Eridar succubi. They wore the most sexy and provocative clothes, or rather, they wore shameful strips of cloth tied around their necks. The moment they appeared, they shamelessly winked at the high elf arcanists. From the old men to the arcanists who were obviously still young, they were all within their hunting range. Finally, nearly 1,000 demons knelt on one knee in front of Xueqi. According to Lord Kill Jaden's orders, from this moment onwards, including me, Dog King Hacker, all 1024 demons will be under the command of Lord Kill Jaden. The one who spoke was a demon officer bathed in flames and lava. He had a head that looked like a dog's head. Dog King Hacker was not the evil god Hacker that the trolls worshipped. This Hacker could only be considered a more powerful mid-level demon commander, and his strength was weaker than a lord's. Xueqi kept an eye on him, because this guy was trash in other aspects, but his special skills were rather interesting. Xueqi's gaze suddenly became sharp. His gaze, which was 10,000 times sharper than a sword, swept across the 1,000 demons from left to right. Then, Xueqi suddenly attacked. A black whip as thick as a pillar swept across the battlefield in 1/100th of a second. The terrifying strengthened version of mental whip was temporarily applied to every demon. Without exception, all of the demons fell to the ground, twitching in pain. Amidst the cries of pain, a ferocious expression appeared on Xueqi's face. Perhaps you haven't heard of me before today, but that's not important. From now on, I'm sure everyone has a very deep understanding of me. Now isn't the time for you to wantonly kill and destroy. When the time comes, I'll let you have your own fun. But before that, you'd better tuck your tails between your legs. Whoever dares to spoil Lord Sargeras's plan, I'll distort the void and crush the souls of your idiots one by one without Lord Sargeras's help. Do you understand? Xueqi's final roar made the thousands of demons tremble. At this moment, Xueqi turned around and called Savis over. He pointed at Savis. Now, all demon guards and doomsday guards must listen to the command of this high elf, Savis. Even if he wants you to commit suicide, you must do it. Understood. Hundreds and thousands of demons knelt on one knee in unison to Savis. It could be seen that Savis's face was flushed with excitement that couldn't be concealed. Xueqi's eyes turned and looked at the enchanting succubi. As for you, do whatever Lord Killed Jaden tells you to do. But you, and you, come here for a moment. Seeing Xueqi's face reveal an evil smile that all men understood. The Kado race arcanists all revealed envious expressions. One reddish-brown, one purple. The two sexy succubi twisted their slender waists that would make single dogs drool. They wrapped their arms around Xueqi's waist seductively and followed Xueqi into the side hall. Almost as soon as the door closed, Xueqi heard a coquettish voice echoing in his ears. Great Lord, you really have good taste. You picked us sisters at once. Lord Infernal, may I ask what type of service you would like? Perhaps some people would ask if Xueqi had really joined Major's discipline and finally wouldn't let Eridar's hooves off? Of course not. Xueqi rubbed his nose. My lords, don't play with me. Just say what you want. Tisk. You saw through me? How boring. After two coquettish shouts, the two succubi revealed their true forms. Of course, they were the Eridar twins. Chapter 10:19. Sneaking into the enemy's rear, playing dirty and forcing women into prostitution, and letting every heavily defended fortress fall from the inside. This was the Eridar Gemini's forte. There was a poem that praised the Gemini. This body is a wretched wretch. Often thrown into the enemy's formation by the boss on a whim. Though in countless battlefields, never once defeated. Never once tasted defeat. Never met a bosom friend. Often hugging each other on the peak of a burning mountain to have sex. Therefore, he didn't know the meaning of this life. This body is destined to be born of wretches. Cough cough. This poem was, of course, made up by players. It was referring to the Gemini's situation in the army where they were not loved or cared for. Every time they could not break through the situation and had to take a roundabout route, they would force the Gemini, the demons who worked behind the enemy's formation, to step in. After successfully opening the door, they would rush into the planet to slaughter and destroy, and the Gemini would have nothing to do with it. It could not be helped. Most of the races in the Burning Legion were muscular men who advocated violence and destruction. They would only scream outside the defensive circle when there was a problem, and those who were willing to put their minds to work were the minority. And so, they kicked the Eridar Gemini over. Xueqi was absolutely sure that there was no such scene in the original history. So, the Gemini's goal was, of course, to keep an eye on this unreliable leader of the army. But before they could observe in the dark, Xueqi pretended to show his power and pulled them out. Even if they lowered their strength to pass through the magic circle, their mental strength would not be weakened much. Xueqi was using the enhanced mental lash, which had a large area of effect. How could a normal elite demon have the same mental strength as the Gemini? That was also the reason why the Gemini's anger was half real. But they were still considered gangsters. They had entered the battlefield to prevent Xueqi from stirring up trouble. In fact, when Xueqi had infused his dark energy, connected with Queen Azhara, and opened the portal, in the eyes of the Burning Legion's higher-ups, the possibility of Xueqi betraying them was almost negligible. The Eridar twins were not angered by this. They immediately reverted to their true colors and started fawning over Xueqi, the newly promoted Great Lord with a bright future ahead of him. Aura's eyes were like silk, and her soft hands gently shook Xueqi's left hand. Hey! Infernal affairs. Master Kil'jaeden is quite satisfied with your performance this time. Queen Salolas leaned directly on Xueqi's right shoulder. Since Master Xueqi is in a good mood, we've spent a lot of effort to get these things from Master for the sake of you making us sisters proud. With that said, Gemini waved her hand at the same time, and 3 treasure chests emitting powerful mana fluctuations appeared in front of Xueqi. The best actor Xueqi, of course, was instantly immersed in his role. Like a money grubber, oh no, like a starving dog. He pounced forward and opened the treasure chest, letting out a series of exclamations. The Eridar twins' faces were still frozen in awkwardness as their hands were suddenly emptied. This brat clearly did not like the Eridar demoness. Seizing the opportunity to escape. But who were Gemini? A professional worker behind enemy lines. A professional, okay? In any case, Xueqi's crazed gaze towards equipment was not an act. Since she knew Xueqi's weakness, it was a small matter that she couldn't seduce Xueqi. Originally, Sir Kil'jaeden wanted us to pick 2 of them first, and the last one is for you. Aura's voice sounded at the right time. Queen Saloras continued, but seeing that you've just become a Void Lord and don't have much good equipment on you, Infernal Waters, I'm afraid that you're a new Void Lord. We sisters will reluctantly part with our treasures and give them to you first. The best actor, Duke, looked embarrassed. This is a piece of equipment that every lord yearns for, Aura said. Queen Salolas sighed. Hey! I really can't bear to. The Eridar twins echoed each other. It was so obvious. How could Xueqi not understand? If Xueqi chose to continue pretending to be stupid and try to get the equipment, they also had a backup plan to deal with Xueqi. Even though Xueqi was the leader of the Church of Immoral Principles, Xueqi's moral principles were as high as ever when it came to soul corruption. Xueqi immediately smiled and said, Infernal Water's position today is all thanks to the 2 Eridar sisters' guidance. If there's anything I can help with, please let me know. Although he said that, his hands did not relax at all. He grabbed the equipment in the 3 chests in his hands, clearly showing that he didn't want the equipment, he wouldn't give his life, everything else was negotiable. Seeing Xueqi acting like a miser, Gemini smiled like a flower and said, Hee. It's not an order. I just hope that Infernal Waters can provide as much detailed information as possible on the enemy, so that we can work for Master Kil'jaeden. What Gemini wanted was never simple destruction and destruction. There were too many boorish people in the Burning Legion who relied on their muscles to make a living. No matter how good Gemini was at fighting, it was impossible for them to surpass vanguard generals like Manaroth, not to mention a big shot like Archimonde. They relied on information to become rich. Just as they reached this step, they were shocked. With many years of secret work experience, they could tell at a glance that Savis, the general who had pushed for the Burning Legion to descend, was completely obedient to Xueqi's words. In addition to the various deductions, Xueqi had actually controlled almost all of the High Elves in a short 2 days. This was a good thing for the army, but to Gemini, it was tantamount to losing an important point of entry. If they wanted to obtain further information, they could not avoid Xueqi. Gemini very straightforwardly proposed an exchange of benefits to Xueqi. To their relief, Xueqi immediately agreed. No problem. But 2 days is too short. I have to prepare the summoning spell and collect information, so this information is definitely not complete. It is only a general idea, and a lot of it came from Savis's words. Xueqi took out a thick piece of parchment from his pocket. On it, there was a long list of names written in Eridar, as well as the corresponding introductions. Gemini was overjoyed when she saw it. Written on it were names such as the Supreme Leader of the Moon Guards, Latuzius, and the Lord of Fort Raven, Ravencase. Of course, there were also the names of some lords. For the Gemini who had just arrived, this was definitely no different than a beacon in the dark. Whether Xueqi was hiding anything or not, it could be said that it was easy to find out. Xueqi would also not fake this kind of thing. It was impossible for Gemini to know Xueqi's evil intentions. Admittedly, these guys who seemed to be very important were indeed the backbone of the Night Elves. But many of them in the original history were just bystanders. For example, just mentioned Latuzius. If this guy did not kneel, there would not be Illidan's position. The ingenuity of this was something that outsiders like the Eridar Gemini could not understand. Moreover, among Queen Azhara's political enemies, they were not the ones who made the most noise. Since they were all cannon fodder teammates in history, Xueqi really did not feel the pinch when he sold them. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.